what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
And we are live. Greetings to our loyal WFYL listeners around the world. Welcome back to your Philadelphia live stream, only on the Freedom Station. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in once again, because you still have the right to hear and the right to be heard. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mike G. As always, with me are Philly Chris, Russ the producer, and Liberty Lee. And you're listening to Mike G in the morning with The Law Matters. And you can listen to our program every Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. So let's be heard. I want to remind our listeners that you can participate in the free and open exchange of thoughts and ideas throughout the entire week by visiting MikeGinthemorning.com. You can check us out during our live stream by scrolling down, clicking on that Twitch link, or clicking on our YouTube channel. For now, until they kick us off again. So be sure and check out MikeGinthemorning.com. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your barber, tell your Uncle Jerry, tell anybody who'll listen to check out MikeGinthemorning.com. I also want to remind our listeners about the powerhouse lineup we've got here at the Freedom Station. We've got Ben Shapiro bringing you the Ben Shapiro Show from weekdays 3 to 5 p.m. We've got Scott Adams coming at you with the Scott Adams Show weekdays from 9 a.m. until noon. Second Amendment advocate Dana Lash coming at you weekdays from noon right until Ben Shapiro. And finally, we want to welcome him to the Freedom Station family. We've got the Michael Knowles Show coming at you weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. So don't forget to tune in and show him some love. I want to remind our listeners that today's episode of Mike G in the Morning is brought to you by Elite Tactical Armory. Do you know what a commercial armory is? Well, you should. Recently, the Pennsylvania government recognized commercial armories as an acceptable mechanism for off-site firearm storage. There are really a bunch of reasons why you might need to store your firearms somewhere outside the home. If you're headed out of town for a while, if your kid is on probation, your scorned ex-wife is trying to accuse you again, or maybe you just ran out of room for all your precious babies, get yourself a unit at Elite Tactical Armory. So visit our friends over at EliteTacticalArmory.com or PACommercialArmory.com. That's EliteTacticalArmory.com or PACommercialArmory.com, because it's important to support those who support freedom. And be sure and tell them Mike G sent ya. And with that, you know what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Hit it, Russ.
You know what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
We've got a very special episode of the program today, and we're going to have participation from our audience who have written in their questions ahead of time. Some will be joining us by telephone, and we've got an esteemed panel here with us today. We've got attorney Richard Roberts from Zader Law joining us once again. It is great to have you back, Rich.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here.
And we've got esteemed instructor Jim Benoit. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Jim is the owner of Cajun Arms and Tuscarora Tactical Training. Based out of Chester County, he was also elected township supervisor, township police commissioner. His interest in tactical firearms was a logical progression of his Israeli martial arts training. He teaches all kinds of things, great training over there, defensive pistol, rifle, shotgun, and we're really glad to have him on the program to get his perspective as a real-world instructor on today's program. Jim, are you with us? Did we lose Jim?
He was with us.
Just kidding.
I can try and
why
get
don't
him
you
back.
give him a call and see what we can do?
All right, yeah. I'll
Okay.
mute it and I'll give him a buzz. All right,
So I
thanks.
want to start off by talking about, before we get to our questions, we've got an article here that Richard Roberts brought to my attention. We got an article dealing with this new measure out of San Jose. And the headline is, San Jose will require gun owners to help cover cost of gun violence. And ultimately, they're asking the taxpayers, they're asking gun owners. The way they phrase it is gun owners are going to compensate the taxpayers for gun-related emergency responses. Now, Rich, when you brought this to my attention and you started to make comments about it, I said, save it for the air. This is a discussion that we need to have with at least 100,000 additional people. So what were the thoughts that came to your mind when you heard about this measure that was being proposed?
Well, one, it's blatantly unconstitutional. I think that's on its face. I think it's a ploy by the municipality in this particular instance to try to say we're being tough on guns and tough on gun violence. And the other thing is they want to have the gun owners reimburse the taxpayers, as if saying gun owners don't pay taxes.
Right.
I believe that they do, and that I believe the taxpayers already fund the municipality to help address gun violence with our great law enforcement officers. And the California, I presume anyway, has a criminal justice system like everywhere else. That's usually how we deal with gun violence. I don't know if making the gun owners pay, who by all accounts are all law-abiding gun owners, pay for the criminal actions of others. I don't.
Right. So that's the first thing that came to my mind is I'm sure the criminals who are out there committing these crimes and these atrocious acts are going to be the ones paying in, right? Because these are on the books gun owners. These are people who have gone through the process and will be paying these taxes, right? They didn't buy them out of the back of somebody's trunk in an alleyway and scratch off the serial numbers. That's not the people who are causing all the problems. It's the people who go through the process legitimately who are ultimately causing all of these problems, right, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the people who buy guns and do violence typically don't buy them at a gun shop.
Yeah.
No. I think we had a case one time. We were talking to a district attorney about a situation. I said, if he really wanted to buy a gun, he wouldn't have bought it from Clayton's gun shop. He might have bought it from Clayton, but it wouldn't have been Clayton's gun shop.
Clayton, the guy who sells them in the back, out of the back of a trunk. Chris, did you get Jim?
I just spoke with him and he got disconnected somehow, so he is available if you want to give him a call back to get him on the line there, Russ.
Russ,
that'd be great.
Get him on the line, Russ, because I really want to hear what he has to say about this as an instructor, because this blows my mind. Talking about the constitutional aspect as well, right? People who go outside the bounds and do something horrible. For example, we always hear that hypothetical, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's what they always say, right? As far as the First Amendment goes. So are you going to make the people who engage in lawful speech pay for the people who do yell fire in a crowded theater? Again, you're punishing people who have done nothing wrong. Jim, are you with us?
I'm here, Mike.
All right. We seem to have lost you in the middle of the live program. I actually gave you a pretty good introduction. Would you guys characterize that as a pretty prestigious introduction?
Yeah,
You'll be able to
good,
check it out. You'll be able to check it out in the playback. Listen to it on the air. 100,000 other people heard it too.
Excellent.
So, Jim, what we just started talking about is San Jose passed this measure, and they're going to require gun owners to pay taxes every single year in order to, quote unquote, compensate taxpayers for gun-related emergency responses. So they're saying that they're going to be able to combat the expense of this gun violence by making law-abiding citizens pay taxes. As an instructor...
That's interesting.
Yeah. What do you think about, as somebody who's a government official who's been elected, right? You've been elected for these positions.
I've been elected.
And you're somebody who teaches law-abiding gun owners on a regular basis. What do you think about this?
I think perhaps they should also tax people that have lighters to help compensate to pay for the firefighters.
Right.
Put out fires in the city.
Yeah, there we go.
I mean, right?
It's
Wow.
people who are abiding by the law and have done nothing wrong are ultimately being punished for people who did something wrong. Don't you think?
Yes, I do. I mean, goodness knows the average gun owner has paid plenty of extra taxes, excise taxes, to help fund government programs, which is fine. I mean, help me out, Mike. Putnam, what is it, tax? That goes to the,
Right.
Right? There's 4 or 5 of them that are heavily taxed. No, that's a tough pill to swallow. I don't know how that could be passed, but I don't know. Some of these folks seem to just make things up as they go, I suppose.
Absolutely. That's what it comes down to. So I want to move right into some of these questions submitted for panels, for the panel. They've been previously submitted online. We're going to start off right away. Randy from Chicago. He says, okay, here's my question. I'm moving to Houston, Texas from Chicago next month. How do I figure out the gun transportation laws for states on my driving route? Now, this is a question that we often get. First of all, good for you leaving Chicago. What do you think? Everybody think that that's a good idea? Randy's made the right move there?
Definitely a good idea.
I think so.
Yeah, I didn't think that there were too many law-abiding gun owners in Chicago, but good for you, Randy. Ultimately, what he needs to understand is when you're transporting through strict states, you're going to be dealing with a federal safe passage law. The statute itself is 18 U.S.C. 926A. And what the law basically says, if you're starting at point A, where your firearms are legal, and going to point B, where your firearms are legal, you can pass through these strict states so long as you store your firearms in a very specific manner. The law says unloaded in the trunk separate from your ammunition. And when we say unloaded, completely unloaded, there's not exactly a definition of unloaded based on the statute, but we would recommend no rounds in any magazine or cylinder while you're transporting. If you don't have a trunk, they talk about having separate locked containers. Keep those as far back from the driver and passengers as possible. Russ, the producer, is giving me a note here. He says, make sure we give some kind of a disclaimer in case somebody misunderstands. He said, let them know this is not legal advice, because if it were, you would get a bill afterwards, is what he says on the notes over here.
There you go.
So, Rich, I want to ask you in particular, have you dealt with people who have had this question before as an attorney?
Yes, and a lot of people misunderstand the law about what they can do and what they can't do. And I think all of us who deal with gun laws and dealt with law-abiding gun owners see far too often you get accidental criminals. People think they're doing the right thing, they're trying to do the right thing, but unfortunately they do the wrong thing. This safe passage law is one of them. Where I have a license in my home state, that means I can go anywhere I want. Not realizing that, we're from Pennsylvania here. New York and New Jersey, not worth the paper it's printed on there. Got a license from Pennsylvania. They go, that's good for you. That's not good here. And I think the safe passage law is important because it provides a way to transport firearms across those strict states. But if an individual does that and chooses to do so on their travels, there are strict restrictions, i.e., you can't stop in one of those strict states. The statute allows for what we call in the statute a reasonable deviation. Granted, that's not defined. I think when we have advised individuals, we say stopping for gas and get moving. You don't get to stop and take a nap.
say gas up and use the restroom before you even hit that border. And there's this bogus misconception out there. People say, I put one in the glove compartment and the other in the back seat. No. First of all, the law specifically says that the glove compartment and center console are not a container for the purposes of this law. And it's based around it being inaccessible. We recommend belt and suspenders, 2 separate lock cases in the trunk. If you don't have a trunk, if you have a trunk, it must be in the trunk. If you don't have a trunk, it can be in that passenger compartment, but you need your lock containers. Now, Jim, as an instructor, first of all, I want to say this. You have been incredibly busy within the last couple of years, haven't you? Did we lose Jim again?
Jim, get a new phone.
Billy Chris, I'm going to stick you on it again, all right?
Let's see what's going on here. Okay, hold on. I'll be
All
right back after these words.
After these words that we won't hear because you're going to mute yourself.
What words? What does that mean?
but Rich, this is a consistent question that we receive, right? And people want to know how to travel through. And what you do have to understand as well is that different laws along the way different states along the way will have different laws. And what I mean is just because a state does honor your license doesn't mean that's the end of the road, because the state may have things like magazine capacity restrictions. There may be certain locations where you can't carry. That may not be the case in your home state. There might be different things as far as duty to disclose to law enforcement officers when you're pulled over. In Pennsylvania, there's no legal obligation to immediately disclose that you're carrying. In other states, there absolutely is. Ohio, that better be the first thing that comes out of your mouth. Yep. Oklahoma, where I was licensed for many years, that better be the first thing that comes out of your mouth. So they need to understand that even if a state is known as a gun-friendly state and they do honor your license, there's still other considerations to take into account, aren't there, Rich?
Yeah, you absolutely have to know. Just because you're allowed to carry a gun, you're allowed to carry a gun in that state pursuant to the permit from your or license from your home state, but you are obligated while carrying in that foreign state to follow their laws. I think the Ohio example, disclosure if you're stopped by police. I think that magazine capacity limitations is probably the one where people really need to get concerned, because all of a sudden your firearm that you've carried every day for 20 years, it's got 15 rounds in the magazine, one in the chamber. You may be 6 over, depending on what state you go to.
Right.
And you're fine to carry, and all of a sudden, but all it takes is that. And it's important to know before you go to the state,
right,
laws are of that state that you're going to, because as the old adage goes, ignorance of the law is no excuse. You get in front of the judge and say, Your Honor, I didn't know I could only have 10 rounds. He goes, son, you know now.
You know now. Ka-clink,
You know
right?
now. Yeah, you know now. So, I mean, it's very important, even at the best of us law-abiding gun owners who obviously go through our days, and I've represented them in a law-abiding gun owner myself. I'm always worried to make sure I comply with the law, because the worst thing I want to do is figure out when the police are talking to me and those handcuffs go on you that, oh, I thought I could do that. Well, you couldn't.
Now, really, Chris, did you get anything?
No, he didn't answer, but I don't know if Russ just wants to try him again and see if that works, but went to his voicemail.
Yeah,
Okay, if it's a cell phone, you might want to shoot a text message, and maybe you can figure out what's going on there before we catch him by surprise by calling again.
Sure.
Rich, another thing that I want to talk about, when you're talking about magazines and magazine capacity restrictions, a lot of people don't understand that, you bought it in your home state, you can cross that line, and it's the possession in and of itself that's a problem. They think, well, I bought it legally, how could this possibly be illegal? Well, the way I tell people is once you cross that border, it becomes like a bag of cocaine. It doesn't matter how you bought it, doesn't matter what you intend to do with it. It's the possession in and of itself that makes it illegal. Is that a fair way to describe it?
It's absolutely a fair way to describe it. I think you can akin it to, there's several states throughout the country who have now legalized recreational marijuana. I know you bought it legal in Washington, but you're back in Pennsylvania, that bag of marijuana is illegal. I don't care. Police officers not going to well, I bought it legal in Wisconsin. Oh, okay, well, move along.
Doesn't
matter.
Why didn't you say so? Why didn't you say so?
Why did you say so? You were from Washington. Oh, I mean, you have to understand. People, I bought it legally. I understand that. But when you come here, having it with more rounds than is allowed under this particular state's law is a crime in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing we need to bring up is, we're not licensed to practice law in every state. This is what we do from the minute we wake up to the minute we go to sleep here in Pennsylvania. But we're not licensed to practice. I'm licensed in PA and Jersey, and you're specifically Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, I don't have a license outside of Pennsylvania.
You're only licensed to practice in America, in other words, right?
I didn't go to that state that shall not be named that you're licensed in. But
well, good for you. It's probably the right decision. Although the people need our help out there. I would wish more of them would move here, though, frankly. So when you travel to these different
try him
states,
again, Russ.
Try him again, Russ.
Sorry.
Even as an attorney, when you travel to these different states, we have to take efforts to know and understand these laws That's why I like being a part of U.S. Law Shield, because we've got that network of attorneys. You can call that non-emergency line, and you can talk to these attorneys from other states and get filled in as to what the law is. I've done that on my travels before because it's just impossible to know the laws of all 50 states, particularly we're not licensed to practice there. Did we get Jim back?
I think so.
Hi, Mike.
Jim?
Yes.
Looks like it's back.
Okay,
We
we
got
got you. Jim, I think that the internet overlords don't want you on this program for some reason.
Perhaps I was thinking of something else, but okay.
So, Jim, we were just talking about traveling through different states. This was a question that came in. And as I understand, you have been incredibly, incredibly busy in the instruction business these last couple of years. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
So there are all kinds of people coming to you from all over the place to get this real world hands-on instruction. And just to set the table a little bit, what kind of practical hands-on instruction is it that drives people to you specifically?
I try my best. We try our best. I'm very fortunate. We have a few instructors that help me because we've been so busy. We try to put real world scenarios out there and try to get in there. Not just, it's not about shooting 10 rings. It's about being super safe and handling your weapon properly and being able to execute it. Goodness knows if, heaven forbid you ever need it. It's practical, real world experience that's brought to our students that, we're not target shooting. We're not plinking at tin cans. This is how you use your gun safely. And heaven forbid you actually need to defend yourself or somebody you love.
It's CajunArms.com. For those of us listening, CajunArms.com. Check that out. And I think that's a great way to put it, Jim, because I always think of you as an instructor as a real world kind of guy. That's what I expect to get when I go and do instruction with you. That's what I expect to get when you're taking a course with you. So we very much appreciate that. Now, with that being said, I'm sure there have been instances where you have had to travel with your firearms, or students have had to travel with their firearms. Is that always a concern, making sure that you're legal along the way?
Absolutely. You don't want to run yourself into any trouble if you stupidly run a stop sign and get pulled over for that, or you're speeding and you're not in compliance in that state. That would be awful.
Absolutely. So I want to get to the next question over here. John from York County says, how does the legal system define militia? Why is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed so difficult to understand or open to so much interpretation? Now, I want to start by saying this. When you're dealing with anything involving the law, when there are disagreements, they get interpreted by the courts. Perhaps they even get up to the Supreme Court of the United States, as we saw with the Second Amendment in Heller and McDonald. Frankly, they have not interpreted the Second Amendment as often as they probably should. They have not taken these cases, and as a result, states have gotten away with absolute murder when it comes to our Second Amendment. But that's why the courts, when they make those interpretations, they really the law means what they say it means. Unfortunately, there's got to be a change among the people, among the law-abiding gun owners, to get us back in a position where the Second Amendment is respected. But that's the practical answer for what that's all about. And we're talking about the militia. Heller ultimately talked about this. They said, first of all, that well-regulated militia being necessary to security of the free state, that is a prefatory clause, meaning it's explaining the reason for that right. They talked about the fact that in every other part of the Constitution where they refer to the people, they're talking about, guess who? The people. I know it's crazy, right? But in the Second Amendment, when they say the right of the people to keep and bear arms, they're actually talking about the people. Wild, wild stuff. And really, when they got into talking about the militia, they're talking about able-bodied males, right, at the time, not talking about the military in and of itself or anything of that nature. The one thing that you have to be careful about, I think, in Pennsylvania is this statute that's on the books dealing with paramilitary training. Rich, are you familiar with this statute?
I am familiar with the statute that we're talking about here.
And really, it seems that if a prosecutor wanted to get incredibly creative, he could jam people up.
He could. I mean, the law prohibits groups of people who are gathered together for purposes of training or practicing or outdoor activities with the purpose of furtherance of civil disorder, which is also defined in the statute, is actually a misdemeanor of the first degree in Pennsylvania. So it prohibits the gathering of individuals for the purpose of training with firearms if they intend to commit, as they say, civil disobedience, which is basically, as the statute defines it, violence which damages or terrifies people or damages property. Now,
like all those peaceful protests we saw this summer, right? All those peaceful protests that we saw this summer.
Yes, if they were gathered practicing before the peaceful protests in Pennsylvania, they certainly could. There is a specific exception for rod and gun clubs,
right,
and things of that nature, because obviously people gather to do that specific thing. But if you got creative, if you think about a traditional militia through history, part of the militia and being part of the militia was training and exercises.
Right.
But if they wanted to say that was for civil disobedience, prosecutor could bring charges under that particular statute.
And they also talk about making bombs and explosive devices and stuff for that purpose in that statute, which I thought was interesting because we were talking about San Jose before, and then this was reactionary. The thing that they did making this tax was reactionary to a mass shooting that took place out in San Jose, California. Now, what they also found when they went back to this nut job's house is that he was also making explosives and things of that nature. So I don't know if next they're going to start to tax people who want to own bombs and homemade grenades and stuff like that, right? Maybe that's the solution to stop that kind of violence. Now, Jim, this brings me back to you because when you talk about the things that you see, the state of the world today, people are certainly concerned for the safety of themselves and their loved ones if there is civil disorder, so to speak. Have you had people come to you in recent months and even within the last year, I'd say by now, who are concerned and want to be able to protect themselves in those kinds of situations?
Yes, absolutely. We're really careful about how we approach our typical student and our group of students, based on what you were saying before about militia and paramilitary type of stuff. We want people to be prepared, and we want like-minded people to meet themselves, but we make it very, very clear in our classes that we're not here to try to make you soldiers or mercenaries or anything of that nature. We're here to teach you how to protect yourselves and those you love. And that can include your neighbors, and that can include people that are outside of what might be a traditional family, but we're careful not to train groups that might appear to be otherwise. Does that make sense, Mike?
That makes sense.
Makes sense.
Well, that's very honorable, Jim. Now, when you're talking about people, what's that?
You have to be careful. You have to walk a line. Within the gun community, we eat our own. It drives me nuts.
Sure.
You've got the hardcore old school hunters. Oh, what do you need an AR-15 for? Blah, 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 blah. And, you've got the young 20-somethings, the YouTubers that, want to run and gun and play John Wick, right? And they don't understand the old heads.
Oh, no.
They've all got to get together, and they need to be smart, right? You can't be too over the top about anything, whether you're talking about guns or abortion or left wing or right wing or blah, blah, blah. You need to play it smart and speak with intelligence and stay within yourself and not upset other folks. If you can speak articulately and speak facts, that's what would bring us all together. But the gun community is not there yet, in my opinion.
Well, thank you certainly for being an ambassador of the gun community and being able to articulate things so well. And this is a little bit of a side note. Jim is an excellent teacher. We're not a teacher by profession, earlier on in life, Jim, right?
Well, I know I may have missed my calling. I was a general contractor on an architectural design and build firm for 35 years. That was that was my first life. But I taught a lot of people a lot of things about how to build stuff. So I guess
Sure.
I was a teacher of sorts.
Sure. Well, that works too. I'm talking about just speaking to crowds in general. One thing that I noticed, we just did a seminar with Jim and Cajun over at Northern Chester County earlier this week. And when Jim goes up there to address the people in the audience, very articulate guy, down to when you were explaining where the bathrooms are and what the code was and everything. I said, this guy really knows how to explain things. You can just notice it in little things like that, even down to that. So that's
we
what.
try to be detail oriented, right? And then maybe mistakes don't get made, perhaps.
Yeah, but I could certainly see how somebody who was getting involved in firearms, regardless of the level, would choose to train with somebody like you because you have those communication skills and you can make something that can be very complicated digestible. I think that's the best way to put it. Now, Jim, I do have one more question for you before we let you go. A lot of people ask me, and this sort of stems out from the previous question, talk about the McCloskey situation over in St. Louis, Missouri. And I don't know that we necessarily have to get into the details of that particular case, but it did have to do with a group of people coming close to their property, coming onto that private roadway. And what I see most, and when I discussed this on Newsmax television right after it happened, this is what I mentioned. Regardless of what you're talking about, whether they did was the correct thing, tactically speaking, whether or not you talk about what they did was the correct thing, legally speaking, whether they're legal allowed to do it, I think the most clear thing we saw from that was that those people did not have a plan in that situation. Would you agree with me that from what they did, it was apparent that they did not have a plan?
Oh, most definitely. They broke my heart watching, between the still photos and watching the video clips. They had little, if any, training. We are adamant during our training classes that we explain to folks that we don't protect our stuff, right? That's what we have insurance for. We don't protect stuff. We protect our lives and our health and our well-being. And they did need to protect their perimeter, but it's such a fine line. And the way they handled their firearms certainly showed that they didn't have very much, if any, training. But they must have been terrified. They did the best they could. It's a little frustrating when you hate to make assumptions about folks, but based on the neighborhood, a gated community, a beautiful home, presumably they have a couple dollars, right? I mean, nice car, nice. Golly, just go out and find somebody that can help you get squared away and to be more assertive. If they walked out with more confidence and actually handled their guns in a perhaps a more proper manner, I think that crowd would have scattered, because in my speculation, I don't think that crowd was exactly well trained, but they had numbers, right? They had numbers, and they were someplace that they weren't supposed to be, basically in their front yard. They must have been terrified, and they did the best they could. So
considering they had no training, no plan, but that's a part of what you do over as an instructor with Cajun Arms, is that you get people better prepared for these situations. We hope they never happen. But if you're better prepared and you have a plan, then you put yourself in the best position for success, correct?
Absolutely, Mike. You got to play that what if game. What if this happens? What if that happens? And it's very helpful to have somebody to bounce that stuff off. And you'll never, if things go pear-shaped, you will never thought, more than likely, of that exact scenario. But if you were around it at least and thought about it in its peripheral aspect of it, that rather than freeze or rather than do something incorrectly, your brain would take over because you had mentally prepared for it. There's as much mental preparation in defending yourself as there is in the physical aspect, in my opinion.
Jim, it blows my mind how people, for some reason, think that they're going to be able to do something they've never done before, never practiced before, in such
right.
a high stress situation for the first time. In what other context in life do we do that? Could you imagine if you had never, you said you're a contractor. Can you imagine if you had never built a house before and I said, okay, not only are you going to build a house right now, but you're going to do it when your life is on the line. You do it wrong, you're going to get killed or go to jail. Go.
Yeah, exactly. And my newer students, they look at me like I'm crazy, which perhaps I am. I don't know, but I hope not. I asked them to raise their hands. Have you ever been in a fight? And some of them raised. Have you ever been punched really hard in the face? Have you ever kickboxed? Have you ever trained in martial arts? You need to know what these things feel like ahead of time. I'm not insinuating you need to get shot or anything crazy like that, but you have to have yourself. You've had to put yourself in a position of extreme stress. Have your heart rate go up to 170. Be able to make proper decisions on how to handle yourself and not get beaten down. And most folks today can't comprehend that. They really can't. They've lived a very sheltered, cloistered sort of life,
I was hoping that that wasn't the black belt test over at Cajun Arms, as you have to get shot. So I'm glad that you cleared that up for us.
No, but I get to punch you in the face, though.
Yeah, okay. So we have a deal. I'll tell you what. If this one gets up to 1,000 views on YouTube, you can punch me in the face on camera. That would be great.
There we go.
It's better that
That's
somebody that cares about you punches you in the neck or the face or the jaw than the first time you ever experienced that for it to be a bad guy. No.
That's right.
Unfortunately,
I can't say that I've never been punched in the face before. I cannot say that.
Right.
Yeah, sorry about that, Mike.
Right. You survived. You lived. You struggled through it. But a lot of people just will just fold in that type of situation, right?
Yeah. No, I could definitely see how you don't want that happening the first time you're in serious danger. So Jim from Cajun Arms, based out of Chester County, Pennsylvania. Check out his website. Get on his mailing list. I'll tell you what, I've been on his mailing list longer than I've known him. And every time I get an email from them, it's like Christmas because you open it up, you see what's going on, what classes are coming up, what they've got for sale. Based out of Pennsylvania, also certified instructors for Delaware, Maryland, and Florida. So check them on out. Jim Benoit from Cajun Arms. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Jim.
Always a pleasure, Mike. Thank you so much.
Hope to have you back soon. For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. Russ, the producer, why don't you work on getting Dave Hatfield on the line with us so we can get him in for these next few questions? I'm going to roll away with it. Philly Chris, feel free to pop in anytime. I feel like we made Philly Chris the intern, right? Go over there. We'll work that phone.
Making calls over here. I don't mind. Whatever helps the show, Mike. That's
See,
what I'm
Philly
here for,
Chris and
brother.
I are in uniform today, right? We've got our black shirt.
Right.
And Rich Roberts, again, is over. Look, at least he didn't wear the suit jacket this time, right?
I'm in uniform, too.
You're in uniform,
the
too?
real attorneys on the show wear a suit and tie to everyone.
Tie on.
Listen, I was at a meeting this morning with you for a very serious gun case at 9:30 in the morning, and I was wearing a suit and tie. And you know what I did the minute we got down those steps after we got outside? You saw it.
No, you rolled the tie. Yeah,
I took the tie off immediately. We got no Dave Hatfield yet, so why don't you kill that call? We can try him again. Philly Chris, I hate to do this to you. Why don't you try to text? Why don't you try to text Hatfield? See if you can get him set up over there. Okay.
All right. You guys talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back.
Talk amongst yourselves. Coffee talk. Right?
Well, we do have a comment. We have a comment on the YouTube channel there from David. We need to get training back in schools, which I fully agree with. Just thought I'd let you guys know in case you didn't see it. So I might want to talk about that.
That is a very interesting point. And Constable Steve from Harrisburg came on the program one time, really early on in the show. And he said he was having a discussion with somebody who said that everybody should need to have training in order to own a firearm. And he said, well, I'm not so sure you should be mandated to do some form of training to exercise a constitutional right. He said, but I've got an idea. How about we just teach firearms safety to everybody in high school? Just make that mandatory training in high school. Then everybody will have that knowledge and they'll have those safety skills. And if they want to own a firearm later in life, then they'll have those skills already. And if not, then at the very least, they got some training. God forbid they were in a situation where they had to handle a firearm, where they could do so safely. And the person's head just about blew up. It exploded everywhere because they were an anti-gun person and they didn't expect that kind of a response. It made too much sense for an anti-gun person, right?
Well, we know how that is. I mean, that seems like sense because I think we get too much of flack our way because they think we're a bunch of cowboys who are just out there.
Right.
And I think if we mandated training, I think which would settle a lot of nerves of the public, they don't want to do that either. So then I just look at you. So what are you really trying to do? And then they really don't have an answer. We just want you to be safe. Well, I give you an option. This is to make us safe or make, safe or make sure there's training for everybody. And of course, the first answer is, well, no, we can't do that. I'm like, oh, okay. What's your alternative? Well, maybe you don't need the AR-15, but I got the Second Amendment. Like, yeah, but do you need it? I'm like, well, that's not really the question. The problem is we got a Second Amendment. And then they go, well, it's not absolute. And I go, it shall not be infringed. It shall not be infringed. I understand we're getting here first, but if you want to change it, you can always get 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and 3/4 of the states. And then you can do whatever you want. There's actually a mechanism.
That's never a discussion, right?
And then they go, well, that's impossible. And I go, exactly. So now we're going to move on.
I think we've got our answer then. Russ, I want to skip ahead to not the next question, but the one after that, because it goes in perfectly with what Rich just said. I think it lines right up. We could sort of continue this conversation. Patrick from Philadelphia, do you have that? Do you have Patrick from Philadelphia's question?
Oh, we had a comment on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
A new one?
Jeremy says, I live in a rural area in PA. Our school district teams up with local gun clubs to get our kids some firearm safety training if the parents want their kids to participate.
That's great. We actually have a gentleman who's supposed to come on the program next week who organizes youth activities with shooting sports. And he's going to tell us a little bit about how they've done so far because they've really expanded. They've caught on, and you get a lot of young folks who are getting this training, getting this experience. So I look forward to having him on the program next week. Hope everybody will join us once again. It's an excellent point. Jeremy also, I'm looking at the comments here now. He also did write in a question. And so we will get to his later on in the program. I want to do Patrick from Philadelphia now, though. You got it up there? Okay, yeah. So here's the question. I love how you put it in bullet points, Russ. This is a two-part question and a statement.
Russ?
Patrick from Philadelphia. The question, part one of the question is, how do you sleep at night? Question part two is, why do you think you need a gun? And statement is, you crazy gun nuts don't have a right to own guns. People are dying in the streets because of people like you. Thank you, Patrick, the mustard-eating knucklehead.
What? I can answer the first one. How do I sleep at night? I'd like to answer that. I sleep on a bed and with a pillow and a fan. And I usually fall asleep with the TV on. That's how I sleep.
I sleep well.
I also snore
because I know that I wake up and go to sleep fighting for our God-given right to own and to keep and bear arms. I fight for our constitutional rights day in, day out, deal with law-abiding gun owners, and fight for the very fabric of this country, Patrick, you mustard-eating knucklehead. I suppose that if we give up our guns, all the bad guys will surrender them as well. Isn't that right, Rich?
I believe that's a point. And my better point, and I think I made this another time we're talking, he says, well, how do I sleep at night? Why do you think you need a gun? Why do you think you need to be able to say whatever you want? Why do you need the ability to criticize the government? Why do you need the ability to practice your religion as you see fit? I could go on and on with every single right, but nobody ever asks those questions because, we respect those rights. For whatever reason, why do I need to own a gun? Because I have the God-given right to protect myself and my loved ones from people who would try to do us harm and kill us.
Well, Rich, it starts at the Second Amendment. It starts at the Second Amendment, but I think you brought something up that's relevant to society today because you said, why do you need the right to say these sorts of things? There are people in this country right now who think you shouldn't have the right to say certain things because they don't agree with them. And the First Amendment isn't about protecting speech that is popular, as you always say, right? Because everybody agrees with it. It's meant to protect unpopular speech.
That's the famous quote from the Texas flag burning First Amendment case. I can't remember. It's a famous attorney from the ACLU says the First Amendment doesn't exist to protect the speech everybody agrees with and likes. If that was what it's for, we wouldn't have it. It's for respect to hate, vile, and disgusting speech nobody likes. But without the First Amendment, you don't have any speech. And then
but people really think that they can pick and choose right now, right? They feel like they can pick and choose, and they can make the decision as to what people can or can't say, or what they shouldn't be allowed to say, or what firearms they should or shouldn't be allowed to own. And ultimately, when you start playing that game, do you really even have a free society?
No, I think that's why those rights are there. Those rights are absolutely there. Well, you can have this, but not this. You can say that, but you can't say this. And there's plenty of countries in the world. I'm sure we could rattle 100 of them off the top of our head where that's what they say. Well, you can say positive things about the government, but you can't say negative things. Well, you can say negative things, but then you don't get to say anything ever again, and nobody knows what happens to you. So, I mean, the point, the criticism is how we get to where we are. I think if you think everything looks about it, it's speech against, we'll go, 100 years ago with slavery. We weren't allowed to talk about how slavery was bad, right? No, we had to talk about it. Some people argued for it. They were wrong. Good. We go back and forth. And I think rights have evolved that way. And speech is a fundamental right for a reason, because the unpopular idea, or the one that people think is wrong today, we talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. It goes, well, maybe the way we thought about it for 100 years is wrong. But if you let the majority opinion one day, it could become the minority opinion. But that's what the country's founded on.
Right.
And the right to keep and bear arms is the right of an individual to protect himself, herself, their family from people who wish to do them harm. Because that's a great point that you made there, though. That is a great point that even if right now they're trying to censor things that you don't agree with, ultimately it will come back to you, right? It never ends there. Ultimately, you're going to be the one that they're going after someday. Yeah, because they say we got to stop hate speech. Okay, well, who decides that? And I think you posed that question. Okay, well, nobody likes it, right? I think everybody can agree with that, right? Nobody likes hate speech and discrimination or racism for discrimination's sake. But, well, who decides what is hate speech? And then does your speech today, which you think is pure and good, becomes hate speech later on? And then all of a sudden you're on the other side of the coin. Because people always think they're the ones who are right all the time, not realizing that eventually there'll be somebody else saying that you're wrong. And then you're going to go, well, I got the First Amendment. Well, I'm sorry. You killed that 20 years ago with your hate speech thing. So now you're stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ultimately there are people who are weaponizing the term hate speech to basically muzzle opinions that they don't agree with. You're saying something I don't like, so I'm going to label it something that makes it a little bit more socially acceptable to say that you shouldn't have the right to speak at all. Now, Philly Chris, I could bring you in on this as a regular guy. Now that you're done taking phone calls, dealing with the phones.
Yeah, right. I didn't get him, unfortunately, so I don't know if Russ wants to try him again or not, but
I think
he did say
Philly
he was
Chris,
in an area. Yeah, go ahead.
I think Philly Chris is the best person to answer from Patrick from Philadelphia. Why do you think you need a gun? Crazy gun nuts don't have a right to own guns. People are dying in the streets because of people like you. By the way, I want to ask, Philly Chris, have you ever killed somebody in the middle of the street?
I'm going to lawyer up and shut up. Hold on.
Hey, all right.
Hold on a minute. Zucchini. No, I never have, and nor do I ever want to. And it's interesting times right now, especially with everything going on over the past year here in Philadelphia, and the murder rates through the roof. We're seeing that across the countries, of course, in a lot of the blue states. And I've talked to people, who are not as like-minded as we are about owning firearms, and some of them have said to me, "Oh, you want to shoot somebody just because they know you own firearms," and it's crazy to me to think that that's how they feel just because you own a firearm, and they don't understand, and it's a lack of education. Going back to the comments about school, but it's more important now than ever to think about these things, and to be willing and able, and to have the training and the mindset to be able to defend yourself. It's the last thing I would ever want to do in the world is to have to defend myself or a loved one. But it's something you need to think about more than ever, of course. Yeah.
think people who don't have that experience and ultimately formulate those opinions about firearms, if they're afforded the opportunity and take the opportunity to have conversations with gun owners, to talk to a gun owner and listen. That's important too, right? To talk to a gun owner and listen, it might change their mind. Now, a lot of them aren't willing to talk and listen. That's just the way it is. A lot of them will not be willing to listen. But I've had people who were maybe on the fence or even a little anti-gun and taken them out to the range and they had a great time. And one gentleman in particular, when I did so, he went back to his family and told them what he'd done. And he said he was mortified with the way they reacted to it. They thought he was a crazy person and all this other stuff and couldn't understand why he would do such a horrible thing. And he said, I learned something by that part more than anything, that this is the way you guys feel every day.
Yeah.
Rich, you haven't killed anybody in the middle of the street, have you? Yeah.
I'm an attorney, so I'm definitely not
Oh,
going to.
you're definitely a lawyer. Shut up.
It was the sidewalk, wasn't it? It wasn't
I
the
said,
street.
you don't. Well, I like Patrick and Philly. You don't have a right to own a gun. Apparently, he doesn't know how to read. So,
yeah.
I do. Not just with the United States Constitution, but I think the Pennsylvania Constitution has even a stronger right than the Second Amendment, which is where this guy from Philadelphia is. Although Philadelphia, well, we can go into what Philadelphia does. Philly Chris would definitely do that. It says people are dying in the streets because of people like you. I go, I don't know about that. Everybody I know who I talk to is a gun owner, never killed anybody in the middle of the street. So
Well,
I don't know if they're dying from people like me. I don't think so. If they are dying from people like me, I hope the Pennsylvania bar has something to say about their law.
They're dying because of well-respected attorneys with a wife and a family. That's what they're doing. They're dying because of people like you.
That would have made the news.
That would have made the news. And I wanted to respond to something that Philly Chris said, where it says we get the critics who don't recognize our right to keep and bear arms. Says you're just looking around to shoot people. I'm like, you know what? You can follow Mike and I around for a few months. We're defending somebody charged with homicide and see how much they like just they're around to shoot people. If that we've defended on numerous occasions, charged with homicide, let me tell you how much he was not wanting to do that. And if he ever had a thought that he actually might have wanted to do that, 5 minutes after those handcuffs go on, and then the 2 years of struggle and agony in the DA and the press that we're going through, and the money that has to be put out to defend something like that, it's if anybody gets it to go shoot somebody, first of all, you have the wrong idea. And second of all, you'll change that tune quickly as soon as you have to call Mike and myself, like, this is what happened. I need to hire you guys. I go, okay.
Absolutely. Moral of the story is that in these situations, in these defensive situations, nobody wins. Nobody wins.
Right.
You can win your case. You could be acquitted. The jury can deem you justified under the circumstances. But you spent 2 years sitting in jail. And even if you're not in jail, 2 years with this hanging over your head, where you didn't sleep a wink at night, where you've been physically ill. I've had a lot of people get divorced during these cases. Their marriage can't last through such a stressful situation. I've had people lose their jobs and spend over $100,000 for a case like that. Now, for U.S. Law Shield members who come on out to our seminars and are part of the program, they know that at least that part is alleviated, but that doesn't impact the other parts, does it? The U.S. Law Shield doesn't say, okay, we'll make sure that you and your wife don't get divorced or that you keep your job or anything like that. So ultimately, nobody wins in these situations. The mainstream media wants everybody to think that gun owners wake up every day and can't wait to kill somebody. They want everybody to think that gun owners who wake up can't wait to kill somebody. I'll tell you what, I don't wake up hoping that my house burns down. But I am not throwing my fire extinguisher out my window anytime soon. God forbid I'm involved in that situation. I want to be able to protect my family. But I pray it never happens. Pray it never happens. We've got some really good questions coming in on YouTube. I want to address them ahead of the slides because these are active listeners right now. For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station. WFYL. Scott says, Patrick, why do police need guns? Answer that, and you'll know why legal, law-abiding citizens need guns too. Right? That's a excellent comment, not really a question. From Lucas, we've got Lucas writing on. And how do you feel that Biden wants to make us rifle owners pay a $200 tax on owning a rifle? That is a good question. I think that it's incredibly elitist to start out, right? To say that only people who have X amount of dollars should be able to protect themselves and their families. In what other context would that make any sense? Going out there and saying that, oh, only if you pay money, then you can do so. And when the NFA was passed, this was really the idea. They wanted to make ownership of these items cost prohibitive. You know, that $200 tax back in 1934, think about that. My dad always tells me hot dogs cost a nickel when he was my age in Coney Island. And, average family car was about $550 at the time. And they knew that people couldn't pay that kind of money for the privilege to even be able to purchase and own one of these things. So I think it's incredibly elitist to say that you're going to put a tax on something, and if people are able to pay that money, if they can afford it, then they should be afforded the privilege, thank you, dear King, for owning one of these things. Any thoughts on that, Rich?
I 100% agree with you. And again, I think it just, if we look when people criticize or try to do these things, I just go to all the rights that we can say 99% of the people agree with. If you want to go speak and criticize the government or use the First Amendment, petition the government for a redress of grievances, that's $200.
You got to pay.
Well, you got to pay us. If you want to fill out this petition, complain about your tax bill, it's $200. You can do it, but you got to pay $200. And I look at it and everybody goes, well, that's insane. Well, it's exactly the same thing. And maybe I just take too much of a legal perspective, but I go, that's exactly what you're doing. Well, no, it's different. Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. Or, you know what? You can remain silent, not answer police questions, but you got to pay the cops $200 in order to do that. Otherwise, you have to talk. And people will go, well, no, that's insane. Or you get a trial by jury, that's $500. Wait, what? Right. Everybody would look at that proposal and think it's absolutely insane. It's no different with this proposal by Biden. It's no different because it's a rifle. It's a firearm in common use by many, many people, from hunters to sportsmen to people who just want to protect themselves or their family. And now they got to pay a cost to exercise the rights. I just have, whether you agree with the formulation of the Second Amendment under Heller, McDonald, or you're critical of gun owners, I think everybody can agree, in order to exercise a right, it should not cost you. It's a right for a reason. You have a right, you get to do it. It doesn't cost you money.
Your head went exactly where mine went when you said invoking the Fifth Amendment right would cost you money. Imagine if Fourth Amendment, think about it like that, right? They show up, they say, okay, well, we'll need a warrant to search if you paid that $200. But if you haven't paid your $200, then we can search without a warrant, right?
Coming right in.
I'm going to need some proof. I'm going to need some proof that you paid your $200. Otherwise, we don't have to get a warrant at all. It's preposterous.
I think when you look at it that way, right, left, middle, if you put it in any other of the rights, they go, well, you can go to church, $500 for you to be able to go to church. Everybody like, well, that's insane. I got a right to go to church and practice as I want to. I go, you just answered my question without answering my question. But then you get, well, it's different. Well, it's not different.
It almost feels like a hostage situation, though, right? Especially when you put it in the context of the other rights and say, you can only do this if you pay us. It's like Goodfellas, right? I can't say this on the air, but we all know which part I'm talking about. You remember which part I'm talking about, right? Know. Oh, I'm sorry, you had a fire. Blank you, pay me, right?
Yeah, he takes the loan. He's like, yep, but that's it. We know what you have have to do.
I don't think there's a tax yet on the F-15s, right?
And not yet.
Maybe we can get a group package if we all get one. Yeah.
Can't wait to own my own nuke.
comments are going bananas right now.
Yeah,
So
we're
we've
getting
got
some
to
good
get a couple
comments
of
out
these, a few more of these questions in before we start to get to the ones who were.
People want to know if it's live. Yes, it is live. I just want to answer that. We are live.
Yes, we are live. Well,
Ladies and
now when they
gentlemen,
hear
Liberty
us,
League.
when they hear us over the airwaves on 11:80 a.m. tomorrow, it will not be live.
That's correct.
Russ, you can cut this out.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah,
We got
Mike.
an
Speaking of
interesting thing.
airwaves,
Hold on. Let's go down the line.
I thought it said message restricted. Message retracted. Okay.
Lucas says, what about eliminating so-called high-capacity magazines? I think we're talking about the same thing, right? I think ultimately, we're talking about Biden trying to eliminate that. Comes back to the same conversation we just had. So, really, you're talking about constitutionally protected. Yeah, I think the greatest part and the part that really answers itself is when Lucas says so-called high-capacity mags, right? All these standard capacity magazines. There's no magic number. Please let me. There's a magic number out there. Please let me know.
There's one question, a couple of them, but this one I really want to speak to because a lot of people are afraid to talk about this and ask. I like what the one says is, what are your thoughts on people with a mental health diagnosis of any kind legally allowed to own a gun? Because a lot of people are so scared with these questions. I mean, you see how many million Americans have anxiety disorders, things like that. So, and even beyond.
So I could start by talking about what the law is at the federal level right now, get a little bit into Pennsylvania law, and then we can sort of take it from there. Right now, under federal law, anybody who has been involuntarily committed to a mental hospital is prohibited from possessing firearms for life unless and until they're able to get restoration. In Pennsylvania, specifically, it goes to what they call a 302, Section 7302 of the Mental Health Procedures Act, which is up to 120 hours. You've got beyond that, you've got a 303, you've got 304s for extended periods of time. And people don't understand that with 302s, it takes an accusation and a doctor's signature. And somebody can accuse somebody of doing something, and that warrant is signed, they get into the hospital, a doctor sits down with them for 15 minutes. If he signs that piece of paper, decides to keep them for up to 120 hours, and that person just lost their right to possess firearms for life. And I can't tell you how many clients I've dealt with over the years who have had some kind of a situation where somebody falsely accused them of something, and even people who were teenagers at the time, young teenagers, had this poor guy who his parents used to threaten him with a 302 when he was a kid if he didn't obey them, and they had him 302'd ultimately when he was a child, and that followed him around for the rest of his life. And it's not just for firearms. That stays with you for many other things. You can't get a TWIC card, a transportation to worker identification credential. So that's going to preclude you from certain kinds of work getting into those secure areas. That's something that sticks with people for a long, long time. And the doctors can't verify whether or not the accusations are true. That would be impossible. They sit there, they sign that piece of paper. They don't want to end up in the newspaper a few weeks down the line where they let the guy go and ultimately he did do something wrong. So they err on the side of caution, which the side of caution really harms the patient in the situation because it follows them around for the rest of their life. So that's what we're dealing with the Pennsylvania level. 303, you will have a hearing after that point. And when I say hearing, it's not like in a courtroom. Rich, you did many 303 hearings in your day, right?
Yeah, the firm before coming to Zaner Law, where I'm at now, we were the mental health attorneys for the patients when they were going 303 and 304 hearings. It's very informal. It's usually an attorney for the hospital, the treating psychiatrist, and then one of us who would represent the patient. And they have to pose that they were a danger to themselves or others, and that has existed in the last 30 days. And there's a hearing master. You have a right to appeal, but I mean, I think the procedures are designed to try to give them some sort of due process. I don't know how much of an examination you can get. They don't have to provide a report beforehand. Usually can talk to the doctor for 5 or 10 minutes about the particular patient. And it's a tough scenario, but I mean, I understand that's a tough question to go about. The 302 diagnosis, Mike, you and I have done cases. Those are always tragic because a lot of times it's a false accusation, or a 15 or 16-year-old who was a 15 or 16-year-old and had a bad day and was depressed, and now all of a sudden it's 10 years later and they're calling us and they're going, I didn't realize this would happen. Said, what's going on? Well, I was 16. I think we've all been there.
Sure.
You have bad days and said something he maybe didn't mean at the time, but shouldn't have said because he was feeling that way, and it follows them for the rest of their lives. I don't know how you address that. I think that's got to be a legislative solution. I think that Pennsylvania has, for firearms specifically, Mike is a pioneer in this area. We have restoration of rights ability in Pennsylvania for those 302 diagnoses, where we have represented. Mike was one of the first. There's an agreement between Pennsylvania and the ATF, because before it was just restoration in Pennsylvania, which that doesn't really help you.
Yeah.
Doesn't help you because the Fed still, but they had an agreement with the ATF, and they said that if they are restored pursuant to 6105F, the Feds will recognize that restoration. I mean, it doesn't take away the 302, still gonna have the Twix, but it at least gives them the ability to get their firearms back. And basically the standard is you have to demonstrate to a judge that you can safely possess firearms without being a danger to yourself or others. So there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but it's another hurdle. It's an expense. And I mean, we're happy to do it. And it usually Mike and I have done cases together, and we've had very happy clients who after years can go hunting with their son. I think we did one in Northumberland County where he just wanted to go hunting with his son. He hadn't been able to do it for many years. He was happy to get it back. But yeah, it's tough because I don't think anybody argues that people who have mental health issues, who are a danger to society, shouldn't possess firearms. I'm not going to sit on here and ever argue that they should, but there has to be due process protections, because what you're talking about is revoking someone's right to keep and bear arms. And I think at any point when you do that, you need to have due process concern and make sure that there's ability to go back, even if it's years later, to check to make sure that the procedure was followed, that he should have been in that situation, or is he a danger to himself now?
Yeah. If I just want to stress the fact that as far as expungement goes, getting rid of it completely, the standard, you're showing that it was invalid in the first place for one of a number of reasons. Could be a technical deficiency, right? Due process requirements were not met, or the sufficiency of the evidence. That only lasts for 6 years, though. So you have to get on that right away. I mean, 6 years is a drop in the bucket compared to some of the people that we have dealt with who come to us and they have something that happened 20 years ago. We say, well, you're well beyond expungement. We could restore your rights. I want to address something in Royal Raccoon's question.
Yeah. He said diagnosis of any kind. I know you guys went to the extreme, like if you were 302 or something like that, but what about any kind of diagnosis too, if you can get to that also?
Yeah, so a diagnosis in and of itself doesn't affect you as far as federal law, doesn't affect you as far as Pennsylvania law. And even if you had some kind of an issue at some point that led to this, when we're doing these restoration proceedings, sometimes there are people who at one point had some kind of legitimate issue. Absolutely. And they're evaluated by a mental health professional who serves as our expert witness. I'm not saying that we have one. We've dealt with a number of people all over Pennsylvania and even New Jersey. Dr. Gianni Pirelli from New Jersey is one of the foremost experts on this topic. He wrote a book called The Behavioral Science of Firearms. And he talks about in that book how different types of diagnoses would impact the ability to safely handle firearms in different ways. And there's a big misconception out there that ultimately says, people ultimately put out there that if anybody's got any type of mental health issue whatsoever, then ultimately they can't be trusted to own a firearm, right? They can't be trusted with the firearm because if you have any type of mental health issues, that would directly impact your ability to safely possess firearms. So that's simply not true. It's just not true. And Pirelli goes into this in his book. It'd be great to have him back on the program. He was on quite some time ago talking about this issue.
And I think it's important for him and individuals like him to talk about that. Not a firearms related case, but I have a bit of experience with individuals being scared with mental health diagnoses. It's a case that I had appealed to the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. It was years ago now. A young woman, it's actually a pediatrician's, had a tragedy and her child had drowned in a tub. Pennsylvania examiner found that she committed child abuse by leaving the child alone with her husband who had mental health issues. We appealed that. We appealed that decision. Hearing officer heard the case, said no, he has a mental health issue. She should have known he was dangerous, and she committed child abuse by leaving a child alone with him. We appealed it to the Commonwealth Court, and in the brief and an oral argument, I made the argument. We had some statistics, and I'm sure they're outdated now because this case is old. And if anybody, it's a published decision by the Commonwealth Court, and they said, well, hold on. If we're presuming that everybody who has a mental health diagnosis is dangerous, can't be trusted to leave their own with a kid, there's 300 million people, and at that time there's 100 million certified diagnosed individuals in the country with a mental illness. Is every single one of those person's spouse on notice? Are they all dangerous simply because they have anxiety or they're depressed? And which is where I understand where the question's coming from. It doesn't affect it legally, but there's a lot of talk about we have to keep firearms away from those who have mental health issues. Definitions are important. Right. And as lawyers, I know Mike will agree, we argue about the definition of words all the time. And you have to be very careful on how you diagnose what a mental health issue that makes someone dangerous to themselves or others, to a point where I wouldn't argue that they should possess a firearm. But somebody has anxiety, depression, things like that are unfortunately, very common. Lots of people suffer from them. That's not a preclusion for them exercising their Second Amendment right. Just because you have anxiety doesn't make you a danger. Just because you're depressed doesn't make you a danger. Just because that gentleman had a mental health diagnosis didn't necessarily make him a dangerous kid. Fortunately, the Commonwealth Court agreed, overturned that decision, and we were fortunate to get a favorable result for her. But, I mean, that's the scary thing. Even a hearing officer in that case who dealt with these cases every day, as soon as she heard that there's a psychiatrist there, he had a mental health diagnosis, so he must be dangerous. Well, why? And I think we have run the same risk if we get too lax in saying yes, because I don't think there's much argument that people with serious mental health issues who are dangerous to themselves or others should not have firearms. But we have to define that in a way where it doesn't become too overbroad and it ends up swallowing the right.
That is excellent points there from attorney Richard Roberts. I want to keep going with these questions, get through them. For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. I see in the comments, Tim Wardak wants a shout out. Tim Wardak, here is your shout out. Thank you for being a loyal listener. Tim Wardak gets a shout out. Tim Wardak. Hey now.
Hey now.
Give him a Ric Flair woo, Chris.
Yeah, woo! Yeah. There you go. That one's for Tim Wardak. Ask and ye shall receive, right?
Yes.
So let's move along. Let's go back one from Patrick from Philadelphia. We got Jake from New Jersey. Jake from State Farm, right? Jake from New Jersey. Jake from New Jersey. He says, what do we got here? Pull that up.
It's on your screen, Mike.
I'm a firearms enthusiast and love reading about the law on the internet. A lot of times in online forums, we all disagree, and I have arguments with my friends about gun laws all the time. Who is right? I don't know that we
whoever has Esquire, right. Whoever has Esquire after the name.
Is it too much of a pun to say that's a loaded question?
Well, I think Jake's always right because he's listening to the show.
It depends on what they said, Jake.
Jake, we need more information.
You're going to have to be a little more specific, Jake. I will say this. Rich and I deal with people all the time who read something very dangerous on the internet. There's a reason why it took me, roughly 500 pages to write that book about Pennsylvania gun law. There's a lot of information out there. And a lot of it doesn't only come down to the statutory law. You've got interpretations through case law. You got regulations. There's a whole lot that goes into it. So sometimes people will miss some of these issues. They'll go back and forth and put forward a statement of law. They'll say that this is what the law is. That could end up getting somebody in a whole lot of trouble. There's a lot of bad information out there. And sometimes how it works is like this. Somebody will tell somebody something that they think they know about gun law. It may or may not be true, but they'll tell the next person who will tell the next person who will tell the next person. By the time we get around the room to the last guy, it's something completely different than the way it started in the first place. And that may have been wrong in the first place as well. So there's a lot of bad information on the internet. I'd be very careful about doing that. Make sure that you're getting your information from qualified professionals wherever you are, somebody who's an attorney who practices in that jurisdiction and practices this area of the law. I mean, you don't want tax advice from Richard or I, do you? Not our area.
No. Gunlawseminar.com.
No.
Right? Gunlawseminar.com.
Well, that's one way, right? One way would be gunlawseminar.com. Come on out to a gun law seminar. I think it's also important to note that you really shouldn't be asking law enforcement officers for advice on the law. This is something we deal with all the time. And first of all, you really shouldn't be putting them in that position because it isn't their job. It's not their job to give you legal advice. Russ should give them that a card with his statement on there. This isn't legal advice because if it were, then there would be a bill that followed. It's simply not their job. You're putting them in a very dangerous position because the information that they provide you with is not an official statement of law, and it may be inaccurate in some way, shape, or form. And ultimately, if you rely on that information and you do break the law, guess what their statement to you is worth in court? Anybody have any ideas? Any input?
I'm going to go with nothing. It's about the amount you paid for that advice.
That's right. It's similar to the amount you paid. Yeah. Craig over at my office always says, it ain't worth a hill of beans. What they said, it ain't worth a hill of beans in the court of law, because that is not an official statement of the law. And I had a situation not too long ago where a guy calls me up. He says, Mike, I asked the law enforcement officer if I do this, this, and this. It was a PICS denial. And he asked him, if I fill this out, there's no way I could get in trouble? And the officer said, no way you can get in trouble. He said, you promise there's no way I could get in trouble? He said, there's no way you could get in trouble. And ultimately, the guy ended up filling out that 4473, being wrong, getting denied, and was charged with a felony. He said, Mike, this cop told me I could do this and I wouldn't get in trouble. Now I'm getting charged with a felony. And it's not going to make any difference whatsoever that that guy ultimately gave him bad advice. He's still being charged. Now, I think you might have knowingly and intentionally, right? It depends on what exactly the law enforcement officer said and how that played into the mens rea element over there. But we see these situations often, don't we, Rich?
Yeah, we do. And especially they say they have a family member who's a police officer, law enforcement, whatever the case may be. I have an example from a seminar I gave. And we're talking about, and it goes back to our first question, interstate travel. He's like, yeah, I talked to a friend of mine. He's a state trooper for about 30 years. He said, listen, you go out of state, just unload it, put it in your glove box, lock the glove box, you're good to go. I said, really? He said, yeah. And I went, no. He's like, that's not right. I'm like, no. He's like, are you sure? Positive. I'm positive. He's like, oh, he told me that. I'm like, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that your law enforcement friend or family member told you that. I'm not saying he didn't say it. I'm just saying what he said is wrong. He's been doing this for 30 years. He's been wrong for 30 years. I don't know what to tell him. But I go, he's wrong. I'm not being disrespectful. That's not what the law says. I mean, if you want to try it, I would suggest you not. But if you really want to test this theory, you can drive across the river to Jake from New Jersey and say, hey, Steve, hey, you have any firearms? Yeah, it's in my glove box. But you know what? It's unloaded and it's locked in there. I should be good. And let me know how that officer reacts to your legal advice. And I think he said it's not worth the hell of beans. Get out of the car. I don't have to get out of the car. Oh, you'll figure out in a few. But I mean, the problem is, well, how much did you pay for that advice? Nothing. That's how much it's worth. Right. You have to talk to qualified. And even I think it's important in that jurisdiction, right? Because if you come to me and say, hey, I want to carry my firearm down to North Carolina. How do I do that? Well, I could probably get you to North Carolina, right, using the federal safe pass-through. But they're like, how do I carry it in North Carolina? Well, you do firearms law for a living. Sure. No idea. And I could give you a referral to an attorney who specializes in firearms law in North Carolina. So even though I like, tout as an attorney, you have to make sure that attorney is fluent in the laws of that particular jurisdiction. Because I couldn't help you with what you're allowed to do, magazine limitations, can you take it into a bar? I mean, you have to make sure that the person knows the laws of where you are, where you're going, because that's also important.
Did we almost have an extra guest on the program there for a second? Did we almost have a special appearance from a celebrity over there, Richard Roberts?
Who?
Almost.
Almost. I think we almost had Little Richard. He could have come on and sang and played the piano for us, right?
No,
Ladies and gentlemen, Little Richard is going to be on the Mike G in the Morning program. That'll get people tuned in, right?
He gets very happy when I do this because he enjoys it so much because he knows if he's good and he's quiet, he gets ice cream afterwards.
I want ice cream.
Get ice cream.
Too.
So now every day since that, he's like, "So do you have to go do it tonight? You gonna talk to Mike tonight? No, later."
I've been doing
just
that
tell
with
him
Russ,
it's
the producer,
Thursdays.
for the last several years. Yeah, I have to
Russ
bribe Russ, the producer, with ice cream, and so he behaves himself on the program as well.
No, I beg to differ. Stromboli.
Stromboli is Russ's ice cream.
Yeah.
All right, let's get a couple of these questions in, and then we'll take questions from the guests that we have coming on the program. We'll get Richard Roberts out of here so Little Richard doesn't get angry with us.
No, he loves you guys, Mike.
We don't want to cut into the ice cream time over there. I might have an angry Little Richard.
What kind of ice cream do you? Yeah, what kind of ice cream are we talking about?
We go to there's a frozen yogurt store that's down the road because he gets to pull all the levers. So it's like vanilla, chocolate, cake, and I'm like, how many flavors you need? All of them. I'm like, that's got to be terrible. I don't know. He's like, you want to try it? No. I do not.
It's just like,
I appreciate you. Sure.
I call it congealed ice
He
cream.
just describes it as a generic frozen yogurt place. Rich is a smart man. He's like, they ain't paying us. I'm not mentioning their name on the air. Maybe you could ask them tonight if they want to say. You can say, listen, if you want to sponsor the program, I'll mention the name of the yogurt place. But until then, your generic frozen yogurt place on the
We're
air.
all capitalists here. I got to get,
That's right.
Yeah. Get in on it.
This one's great. You're going to love this, Rich. Steve from Plymouth Meeting. If someone breaks into my house, can I shoot them? What if I'm in fear of my life? Perfect question, right?
I think those are two different scenarios, though.
We can talk about this for 2 hours.
Right.
There's this misconception that if someone breaks into your house, you can shoot them. It is not that simple. Under the Castle Doctrine, someone is in the process of or already has unlawfully and forcefully entered your dwelling, residence, or occupied vehicle. The law will presume that you had a reasonable belief that deadly force is immediately necessary to prevent death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or rape, and ultimately that you were justified. They'll start off in your corner with that presumption. Now, presumptions can be overcome by evidence. So if there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that shows you didn't have that reasonable belief or couldn't have that reasonable belief, then the presumption will be overcome by evidence. Just because somebody breaks into your house, it doesn't turn it into an execution chamber, so to speak, right? You still must have that reasonable belief that deadly force is immediately necessary. And of course, we're talking about Pennsylvania right now. We're not talking about other states because we're not licensed. But I could tell you that in New Jersey, you must have a reasonable belief that deadly force is immediately necessary to protect yourself from death or substantial bodily harm. They do include aggravated sexual assault in the definition of substantial bodily harm. And as a result, you could also include rape, right? I think that would be fair to say, including the definition over there. So Pennsylvania has that kidnapping added wrinkle that New Jersey does not have. But it is much more complicated than whether or not somebody broke into your home. No, that is not the standard. Just like, what if I'm in fear of my life? Well, did you have a reasonable belief? People have unreasonable beliefs all the time, right? Did you have a reasonable belief that deadly force was immediately necessary? And we do 2-hour seminars on this stuff. Rich, I always love what you say about the I'm in fear of my life, because that's the best way to put it, in my opinion. Why don't you tell us what you think about if I'm in fear of my life?
I think that is a term that's been used, and I think it's used on, from radio programs, talking heads, when they talk about, I was in fear for my life and I am allowed to use deadly force. At least when it comes to Pennsylvania, fear for your life has literally zero to do with it. Has nothing to do with it. Nothing whatsoever. And fearing for your life is a problem because you start saying that. If we pick apart and that you really weren't fearing for your life, what else were you lying about? And I always use the example in the seminars. I'm like, you could be the most heinous serial killer of all time, have no fear of death whatsoever, an individual points a firearm at your head, no fear of death, about to pull the trigger, can you use deadly force? Don't fear for my life at all. I'm Ted Bundy. Yeah, yes. You didn't fear for your life, not at all.
Well, and ultimately, it's that imaginary reasonable person under those same or similar circumstances would have that belief. And on the other end, you could have somebody who's got an unreasonable fear of their life, right? They see a clown walking down the street. Oh my God, I'm about to die. I'm deathly afraid of clowns. That belief isn't reasonable. That person didn't behave reasonably. It wasn't a reasonable belief. That person's a maniac, right?
We can throw it to Mike. I like Mike's example of the guy who says, I'm going to shoot lightning bolts from my fingers and kill you if you don't do what I want to do. And he picks up his fingers, and you then use your firearm to defend yourself, and you kill that man. Would it be an imminent risk if he actually could shoot thunderbolts or lightning fingers? Sure, I believe that would cause, at least at a minimum, serious bodily injury. But is it reasonable to believe he can actually shoot lightning bolts from his fingers? No. And that's an unreasonable belief. So, I mean, a lot of these cases, and I think it's important to realize, is always if it's never black and white. And I think it's important to understand that if you're, and I always use if an individual's forced to use deadly force to defend themselves or defend a loved one, that realize that it's gray, and then Mike would his lawyer up and shut up. Never, ever, ever, ever make statements. That's the worst thing you can do.
Does static discharge count as lightning bolts?
That's a good question.
I'm gonna rub my socks on the carpet, and then I'm gonna shock you.
Somebody out there, this day and age, with everything that's on the internet, there may very well be somebody out there who believes that some people can shoot lightning bolts out of their fingers. And even if that person has researched this on the internet for hundreds of hours and truly believes that it's the case, and therefore is in legitimate fear of their life, right? They do fear for their life under those circumstances. They are still not justified. It's an unreasonable belief under the circumstances. You know, it's crazy. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but it just makes me think about it. When I played college ball out in Oklahoma, there was another ball player in Oklahoma, different program, and he was an all-American ball player, very, very talented guy. And he didn't show up at the field for a few days, apparently. And this is, top program in the nation. People don't miss practice. It's not like that. This is not a hobby. This is your entire life. And it turned out that he had some kind of a breakdown of some kind and hadn't eaten for like a week and was writing in his journal about how he was having these battles with demons in the middle of the night and killing them by shooting lightning bolts out of his fingers. Crazy stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what compelled me to bring that up on the air. Suck the air.
See if he wants to come on the show, Mike. Yeah.
I always thought that was a fascinating story because this
it
guy,
is. Yeah.
Ultra talented kid, and that ended up happening. But anyhow, that's the kind of stuff we talk about on the Mike G in the Morning program, right? LightningBoltSeminar.com. So I go on the LightningBoltLawSeminar.com. Okay. Lucas says, on that topic, the state of North Carolina honors our carry permit. Does that mean I can carry in that state and any other state that honors our permit? Well, that's the nature of the reciprocity agreements, is they will give you the same rights and protections as someone who is licensed in their state. Still be aware that there may be other restrictions where you can carry, things of that nature. Magazine capacity restrictions, whether you have to inform law enforcement officers if you're pulled over. Another question from Jeremy: if someone is 302'd in PA and they change residency to another state, are they still prohibited from owning a firearm in their new state since a 302 does not qualify for a federal firearms prohibition? Well, you'd probably have to duke that out with the feds, because the two cases that we have interpreting 302 under the federal law ultimately are lower court cases. That hasn't gone into the Third Circuit dealing with that, certainly not through the Supreme Court of the United States. We have had people who moved to other states and the 302 jammed them up over there. But if you're able to resolve it in Pennsylvania through that restoration of rights procedure, then because of the agreement with the federal government, as Rich mentioned, you'll be square as far as the feds go. You want to add anything about that, Rich? Because we've dealt with that specific scenario on numerous occasions.
Yeah, the 302 prohibition, when it comes to the feds, the two federal courts you're talking about, the Eastern and Western District of Pennsylvania, have said that because the nature of a 302, which we talked about earlier, involves the basic gist of the case is because it involves no due process. There's no advocate for the patient. There's no attorney for the hospital or the physician. It's simply really a physician signing off on the paperwork. The federal law gives you a prohibition if you're declared a mental defective or committed to a mental institution. And because that 302 doesn't have any of those due process protections, it's technically not committed to a mental institution, which results in a prohibition. There's also a circuit case course from Maine with similar provisions, not exactly the same as the 302. That's what we call persuasive authority. It's not directly on point, but that would be a case I'd certainly point to if you wanted to duke it out with the feds on whether or not it was a complete prohibition. That federal courts seem to think that because the 302 is an emergency procedure designed to help somebody who needs it right now, we don't have time to drag in a judge and attorneys and have a long argument, that it doesn't qualify as commitment. But again, the problem is you run into these situations where it's tough because who wants to be the test case, right?
It's really unfortunate because it seems like it. I think it's a pretty clear-cut issue. I don't think there's that much of an argument. On the other side, I don't think it's a solid argument. But who wants to? But who's got the time, the effort, and the money to litigate this thing in federal court like that? Who wants to be the test case in a criminal proceeding? Nobody. So people get faced with this proposition. Okay, do I try this and maybe lose, or do I take the path of least resistance and just simply go ahead and restore my rights in Pennsylvania? We've had to do this for people who have been denied in Colorado and in Florida and a couple of other states. Those are the ones that come to mind most recently, but something that we do on a regular basis. Last question over here. This is also Jeremy. This is Jeremy from Columbia County. Hey, can you guys explain what's going on with the most recent gun case in California? My limited understanding is the most recent case is being held up by another case, which may have an impact. And that case is also held up by a different case that may have an impact on that case. Right. So what happens in these situations sometimes is you'll get a decision, and then if it's appealed, they'll ask for what they call a stay, put everything on hold, because there's another case that would impact the way the court would rule. Because if it's ultimately going to be the same court who makes the decision and they're dealing with the same exact issue, it doesn't make sense that they'd rule one way in one case and then the other case would come up and they'd somehow come up with the completely opposite answer. So in those situations, a lot of times they'll put a stay. For example, when I was litigating against the city of Harrisburg, they asked for a stay while Act 192 was being litigated because we were suing under Act 192 and there was litigation as to whether Act 192 was constitutional. And it didn't have anything to do with the contents of the legislation, but more about the way it was passed, alleging that they didn't follow certain procedures and specifically that it violated the single subject rule. So that issue would have an impact on our case because if we're litigating under Act 192 and it gets struck down and this other case is unconstitutional, well, then that poses a problem for our case, right? So that's what happens sometimes in these cases. Ninth Circuit is always bonkers with these Second Amendment issues because you'll get sometimes you'll get lucky with, a trial court judge, like in this case, or even a 3-judge panel. But it seems whenever they bring everybody in en banc, right, Rich? What ends up happening?
Yeah. They get overturned because then you get lucky on your draw with the 3-judge panel, and then Michael sent me the decision. He goes, how long does this survive until they can get the 10 judges en banc together and 2 months to write the opinion? That's about the end of that decision. Right. I mean, it's just, it's unfortunate.
So hang tight. Let me see before I cut you loose, Rich. Any other contacts? How can I get in contact with Richard Roberts? Very cool. We'll put you in touch. You look him up. He's famous. Check him out on the internet, right?
Yeah, I'm famous. You can search me. You can find me.
Yeah,
It's all right.
Randy, Mike, it's because of your book that I knew to check my daughter's medical records. Okay, very good. It's always a good idea to make sure that people are eligible to own and possess firearms. Very, very important.
I think that's vitally important.
Yeah. I don't think people understand what a big deal it is if you get denied, right? They say, "Oh, I don't understand what the big deal is. I figured I'd give it a shot." Right. No.
Right.
Well,
if you're positive, go ahead. If you have any questions whatsoever, I'd call the firearms attorney, because people think I go into the store, I think I might have something in my past, but let me go. Yeah. Oh, they denied me. And then what necessarily happens? They call us and they go, "Well, I haven't been charged yet." Well, they're going to charge you with a crime. And I think Mike has a great line when we talk to these potential clients that we deal with is, it'll be all right. Well, maybe 5 years ago. Now, 2 months later, they get a call. "Hey, this guy from the state police wants to talk to me." Don't talk to him. Don't talk to him, because they'll say that, and it's a litigation issue that you knew and you tried to pull a fast one.
Yeah.
Now, the clients who typically call us aren't trying to pull a fast one. They made a legitimate mistake, and we've certainly litigated and provided defenses. But again, if you're not sure, you should contact a licensed attorney in your area to do an investigation, somebody who knows firearms law, because it'll cost you more if you don't do that. Spend a little money, ensure that you're eligible to purchase firearms, because you're going, well, I want to save that. Trust me, if you're wrong, it costs you more in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, how many investigations have we done over the years? Criminal cases, we work together in these types of situations where people call, and a lot of times they don't seem to understand the magnitude. They think it's not going to be a big deal. Maybe their friend told them it wasn't going to be a big deal, or they read somewhere on the internet that it wasn't going to be a big deal. And a lot of people are in denial when they're charged with a felony in the court of law. It's unfortunate.
I go, how fortunate? I'll be okay. And then 3 months later, we get an email.
Right. Yeah.
Text
then we get that frantic.
"Hey, guess who called me today? Oh, I remember him. Guess who called him?" I'm like, "Let me guess." Right. And it's unfortunate because I don't think they've intended to do anything wrong, and most of the time I don't think they have legally done anything wrong. But it's a situation you don't want to be in. So it's better to try to prevent that before it happens.
Yeah. So good deal, Rich. I want to ask you before you go, thoughts on the Cosby case?
Oh no, the Cosby case. Oh no, I have actually gotten. Let me tell you. So the firm I work for has not done this kind of law. They brought me on to bring this on, and I'm happy to do it. So here's I will never, under any circumstance, defend Bill Cosby. I just won't. I think you went in front of a jury. They heard the evidence, some of the evidence, and I'll talk about that. I don't know if they should have heard, but they convicted him. I don't think anybody's going to defend Cosby for being the lovable family man he portrayed on his show. So this is not a defense of the accusation, and I hope the result of this case doesn't deter women who have legitimate cases from bringing them out, no matter how powerful the individual is. But the issue you run into in Cosby, and there's a lot of hot takes in the media about what it means. I don't think any of those hot takes in the media that I saw actually read the opinion, which is long. It's 79 pages, the majority opinion. The majority opinion is important in the criminal justice context that I work, Mike works, any other criminal defense attorney. Basically, when we're in a case and we're dealing with the prosecutor, we're dealing with the assistant district attorney, elected district attorney, whomever, and they give us assurances. They give us promises, right? Plead guilty. We're gonna drop these 3 charges. Your client will plead to this, pay a fine. I go to my client. Here's the offer. Here's my advice. Here's the good in your case. Here's the bad in your case. You got to make a decision. Here's the risk you're taking if we go to trial. We go to court on that assurance. He decides to take that offer, plead guilty. And we presume when we get in front of the judge, the prosecutor makes a motion, withdraws those charges. My client pleads guilty to this case. He gets a fine. He goes home. And it's built on trust. And basically what the Cosby case turns into is Bruce Castor, the elected district attorney in 2005 when the case first came up, promised Bill Cosby that he would not prosecute him for the allegations the young lady had made at the time. He didn't believe in his review of the evidence that there was enough evidence to prove him guilty beyond reasonable doubt at trial, for whatever the reasons may be. And because of that, he thought that the young lady who brought the accusations' best chance for justice was going to the civil system and getting a civil judgment. And the reason he agrees not to prosecute is so Bill Cosby, who's going to be deposed and asked questions about what happened, can't say, invoke my Fifth Amendment right for self-incrimination, which is a right we all have. But the way a prosecutor gets around that is he granting immunity, or in this case, promising not to prosecute, because you're not going to incriminate yourself because you're not going to be tried for this particular crime. He has to answer the questions. He answers the questions. He eventually settles with the young lady for a few $1 million. And then a new DA comes in, Bruce Castor leaves, retires, gets beaten. I forget what the circumstances was. Ignores that promise, prosecutes Bill Cosby. The problem I have with that scenario is if I cannot trust a prosecutor at their word, the justice system and the agreements that I make with prosecutors or any criminal defense attorney makes with prosecutors basically mean nothing. So I talk to an ADA, we get a deal worked out. The ADA leaves the office for a better opportunity. Great. We go up to court. This new ADA shows up, looks at Mike and go, yeah, I'm not dropping those 3. He pled guilty to everything. We're sending him upstate for 10 years. Well, hold on, because my advice and Mike's advice to our client is based on what the prosecutor promised us. Because if he says, I'm not dropping any of the charges, your guy can plead guilty to anything, my advice to the client is going to be, you got nothing to lose by going to trial, right? What do you have to lose by going to trial? It won't be any different than if you plead guilty, so let's give it a shot. So you have to be able to depend on the promises from the government, from the prosecutor, in order to properly advise your client in a criminal justice system. And I think that's what people miss because they look at the big headline. Bill Cosby was convicted of what he was convicted of. Now he gets to go home. The issue is because people look for the 5-minute headline that what is this about? It's really about the trust between a prosecutor and a defense attorney and that attorney's client in order for the system to work. Because if I can't trust a prosecutor, we don't have a criminal justice system. We don't.
Yeah,
and
people
I
miss
think
the point on these things a whole lot. They miss the point. All I see is this guy is a monster. He's a vicious, vile human being. He's disgusting. He deserves to be in jail for the rest of his life. They miss the issue as to why this turned out the way it did. It doesn't feel right to them, and I get that. I get that it doesn't feel right to them. I'm not saying that, he's not a disgusting person. Was I talking over you?
No, you weren't at all. And I think that's the point. And the issue becomes is people just look at the headline and they see Bill Cosby getting driven out of prison and going home. And
given the peace sign. Did you see that? Given the peace sign.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
Listening to his lawyer at that point, because you just need to put your head down and walk away. But that's my advice to him, although he's not paying me, so he's not going to care about my advice. But the issue is I get the visceral reaction from the public about what happened. But I think if they take the time, and most people won't, if they take the time to actually read the decision and what the justices of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said is basically you have to be able to trust the prosecutor. Because if we can't trust the prosecutor, what's a defense attorney and what's our justice system supposed to do? He made this promise. I don't know if that new DA obviously wouldn't have made that promise. Is just, it's the issue. And then some of the other comments, just the young lady's attorney who said, I would have rather had him plead the Fifth Amendment at the civil case. It would have been better for you. No, it wouldn't. Everybody who actually took 5 minutes to look at those depositions, those statements he made at the deposition killed. So, I mean, that's the situation. He's like, we could have taken an adverse but that's the issue we have.
Gotcha. Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining us. Get the kids some ice cream, will you? Get out of here.
I'm definitely going to get the kids some ice cream. They'll be climbing over me here in a little bit. So
get little Richard some ice cream. He's been a good patient boy. It's been a long time. Thank you so much for joining us, Rich. We hope to have you back on the program again soon.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you soon.
See you, Rich. Have a good one.
For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. First order of business before we start discussing with others, we've got a birthday on the program.
Yes, we do. Mm-hmm.
Trivia question. When was Liberty Lee born?
4th of
I know.
July?
What's
Oh.
that?
4th of July?
Go, Russ.
That is correct.
Oh, really?
4th of
Happy
July,
Independence
baby.
Day to everybody, and happy birthday to not only America, but Liberty Lee.
Thank you.
So-
Happy birthday.
So let's sing it at the same time. Everybody, I want all of our listeners, all of our audience members to join on in.
There we go.
Happy birthday
This is still under copyright.
to you.
you.
Happy birthday to you. This latency is killing me.
I know.
Happy
This is why people don't sing
birthday,
in these groups.
Happy
We
birthday
can't sing, but happy birthday
to
It
you.
sounds like I'm being sung "Happy Birthday" from the Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, right. This whole time,
Little
the
echo.
latency is a killer with that one.
Yeah.
Oh,
probably not
somebody on
Yeah.
YouTube. Actually, who was it? Randy. Oh, Randy. Hi, Randy. He wants to know why he never sees my face.
Oh yeah. Oh, Liberty.
And I'll show my face the day that Russ. The day Russ-
What is that? Oh.
Got somebody singing in Italian.
Is that a recording of Mike?
Oh, bravo!
Is that a
Sounded
recording
like
of
Russ,
Mike?
Actually.
You didn't know that I hired
One of our
somebody
loyal
like-
listeners stopped by to sing "Happy Birthday" in Italian. to
Oh.
you.
That's not a loyal listener. I paid that guy. I paid an opera singer to show up.
Right, that's right.
I'll show my face the day Russ shows his face from the South
No.
Pole. Oh, the North Pole.
Yeah, that's probably.
go.
We're
a
kind of
safe
like
bet.
the men behind the curtain. Am I gonna get in trouble for saying I'm a
We've
man?
got, we've got CB. We got CB wishing you a happy birthday as well. Thank you to
Thank you,
CB for
Zucchini ice
Liberty
cream.
Lee.
Right.
Also recommending zucchini flavored ice cream. I love it.
What?
I love it. And so zucchini flavored ice cream are for children when they're good. When they're bad, they get mustard flavored ice cream. They get a bowl of mustard if they don't behave. Jeremy
Right.
wishes a happy birthday to Liberty Lee. Happy birthday from Jeremy. We thank you, Jeremy, for the well wishes. So what else do we have on the agenda this evening?
Well, Scott, we were gonna have Scott from Lehigh.
So what are we waiting for? Do we have a producer on this program or?
No.
I haven't heard him. Did he come? Did he go off? I haven't heard from Russ.
What, you guys
Russ?
can't hear me?
Oh,
taking it now.
Okay, there you are.
there you are. I
it is.
couldn't
Maybe
hear
it's
for a
because you
minute.
guys all talk
Somebody
over
wrote
me
in.
all
Somebody
the
wrote
time.
into the program asking what's Russ's last name? And so we responded, the producer.
Good job.
There
10
we
out
go,
of
there you
10.
go. What is
That's
Russ
right.
the producer's real last name? The answer is the producer. That is his
The
real
producer.
last name. Russ the producer.
He was born like that.
Yes.
Man, 2 hours flew by. Do we want to
Yeah.
give people a couple of minutes to talk?
Well, we still have this
Yeah.
question from John that you made me put in the PowerPoint.
Is it too late for Scott or
I
no?
have no idea.
I was looking forward to Scott from Lehigh.
Yeah, get him on. See if you can
maybe
do
we
it,
did
Chris.
this
What,
one.
Chris? Why don't you pre-call?
Okay.
Well, Russ, just do it. Russ, just do it.
Do
Yeah,
what?
We'll
I
give it
think
a
he
shot.
was in the comments not too long ago, so he might
Scott?
still be listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
We said we are gonna call him in the
Fine.
beginning of the program. We're way late.
Yeah. No, we did.
If
We
not,
said
we'll
we're
have
going to
him
call
next.
him in the beginning of the program. That's on them. Whoever
Yeah.
said that.
We have a few people we're supposed to
said that, right?
call.
Whoever said that should be fired. You know,
Okay,
people
Scott
people have
from- wait a
mentioned
minute.
things about that they actually enjoy when Russ and I fight on the air.
That's right. That's right.
I said if we were to tape the behind the scenes stuff, we'd have endless material to sell to those
Oh,
folks. If they
dear.
enjoy Russ and I fighting on the air, then we should just start recording anything on or off the air. We'll have tons of material to sell. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely need to start recording some of our phone conversations off
yeah.
the air. Yeah.
How about this one? Does
I've
Scott
recorded almost
actually
all of them
have
for
a
the past
phone number
year,
for
so.
me to call, or do you guys expect me to just telepathically retrieve it from him?
Yeah. What kind of producer are you? A good producer guesses the telephone
It's
number.
in the
It's in the doc.
document.
I
Put
thought
it in the
Philly
doc.
I
Oh
thought Philly
wow!
Chris
No,
put
it's
Somebody
not.
wrote
I
Scott
see.
F. Lehigh, been to 100 plus gun law seminars with
And
no
no
telephone
phone
number.
number.
That's
No,
awesome.
but I think Philly Chris put it somewhere else, didn't you, Philly Chris, or no?
Why would you put it
Hang on.
somewhere
He
else?
put it somewhere that was
No.
not next to Scott's name.
No.
Well, we're ready
Why
for him
would-
because
In
it's
what
the gun
in what
episode.
I'll add it
universe
for
does
you.
any
Hold
of
on a
this
second.
make sense? Let me put somebody's name and let me put the contact information. Oh wait, let me put it at like the bottom of the dock for no reason. Come on, you
Is
guys.
it down there? Did somebody add it?
No, we need it added. I don't
hang
have
on.
it.
Yeah.
So.
No, I was supposed to pull
I'll
the.
put
I was
it in
supposed to
now.
pull his number out of
Actually,
out of my
so, yeah,
butt.
No, it's just there.
We need like a contact sheet because we have all these regular.
Scott has been
Okay.
to 100 plus gun law seminars.
Scott has left the building. Nope, that's the wrong number, Chris. That's
And you're
definitely-
putting it
Nope.
under the
No,
panel.
hold on a minute.
You got the wrong Scott, Chris.
And that
Hold
one's
on a
for
second.
that one's for
Hold on,
David
technical
Hatfield.
difficulties.
I can say this because
Here
it
it
was
is.
the wrong area code.
Yeah,
I knew it was
that's
the wrong
right.
area
Thank
code.
you.
I
Yeah.
started putting in the Harrisburg area code. I said that ain't Scott, my friend.
Well, now we
Yeah, there you
know.
go.
Yeah.
We
It's
already
like-
said he's from the
Do
Lehigh
we know
Valley.
what happened to Corporal Hatfield? Was he too
I know
busy
what you
eating
guys are
a?
doing.
Was he
Man,
too busy
that's a
eating
shame.
mustard to
I
open the
would've
phone?
loved- I would have.
We were really supposed to have him on.
Yeah, I would have loved to have Hatfield on.
He did say
maybe
he
next
was in an
time.
area where the service might have been sketchy, so I think that's what
I got
happened.
it.
Okay.
Next week, though.
He was
Next
interested in coming on, so we'll have him
No
back.
mustard award.
He must have
Tune
been
in.
at,
Big announcement next week.
he must have been at the mustard store, you
I
guys.
love having Hatfield on because I met him while he was giving lectures, and since then we've maintained a relationship as not only good friends but expert witness. Yeah, he's the guy who used to do ballistics for the state police. And he's an instructor, United States Marine Corps. List goes on and on and on and on. Very knowledgeable dude, but also very articulate. If you sat in on one of his gun law seminars, he understood stuff inside and out. Wildly entertaining. Love to have him on the program. That's why he's such a great expert witness too, because he talks to people in a way you could understand. Very well spoken.
Scott. Oh, Scott said he's still here, so he is just waiting on that call.
Excellent.
He's still
Yeah.
here.
Of course, he's
Yay.
loyal. Scott is loyal.
He is loyal. 100.
Our
100
loyal
plus.
WFYL listener.
In
Yeah,
fact, I
I'll
had an
say.
idea that we quiz Scott on one show because he's been to so many
Actually,
seminars.
yeah.
That's a good idea. We should see who wants to be in a contest on the air, right?
Yeah,
Let's do a
yeah,
live
I think
contest.
YouTube
Live
has rules
gun
against
law.
contests, you guys.
Gosh.
What?
Okay.
I think YouTube has rules against contests.
No, not like a real. We'll give him mustard. Whatever. Come on.
Yeah, come on.
You always got to squash the ideas. What's going on?
You win bragging
Let's
rights.
flip
There's a lot
it,
of
guys.
rules
Let's
in the
flip it for
contest.
next
We
week.
can have a contest.
We should flip it for next week, and we should have we
Yeah.
have the gun lawyers asking the attendees questions and see.
Scott.
Is this
Don't worry.
Scott?
Yes, it is.
This is the
There he
famous
is.
Scott who has attended over 100 gun law seminars.
119, but I don't know how famous I am. After all, I'm not King Richard or Mike G.
Well, King Richard has been dethroned because Scott's on the program. I'm just kidding. Scott, thank you
How you
so
gonna
much
do-
for. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott. We really appreciate you coming on. As a gun owner who's been to so many legal seminars, you really are the gold standard for what it takes to be educated, to know and understand the law. And having seen you at so many seminars and seeing you be so familiar with the law as a gun owner, it's really the best thing an attorney could ask for, because if you're getting that call that God forbid you had to protect yourself, that you acted within the bounds of the law. There would never be any question in my mind, and Richard's mind, and Brett Regal's mind, or Gilbert's mind, that you acted within the bounds of the law. If we get that call, makes our job a whole lot easier, and obviously makes your life a whole lot easier. When was it that you saw the importance of getting educated on gun law?
Well, actually, when I inherited my father's service revolver after he passed away, I knew I made the decision where, hey, okay, I want to get a gun for self-defense. And I knew if I ever used it, I'm going to need an attorney.
Right.
That's 150% guaranteed. And so I had heard of one particular attorney, not too far from where I live, left a message and never got back to me. And I just wanted to make an appointment, say, hey, I don't know anything about the law. Can you teach me this? And then a couple years later, a friend of mine invited me to my first U.S. Law Shield seminar, and I jumped at the chance because I'm like, I want to know. And you've been stuck with me ever since, Mike.
The rest is history, right, Scott? The rest is history. So
yes.
What? But so once you got into it, some people come out to a seminar, they come out to a couple. We've got a lot of people who have been to more than 10 or even 20. I saw Dave Cressman in the comments earlier tonight, and Dave Cressman is probably in second place in Pennsylvania to you. He hasn't been over 100, but quite a few. So what is it that drove you to, after coming to a couple, saying, you know what, I need to continue this journey to further my education about gun law. I need to continue to attend these seminars and make sure I really know this stuff inside and out. What drives that?
Well, a couple of things all together. I'm not the type of person that can go to one or two seminars and think I know it all. This is too important because, as you often say in the seminars, you make a mistake and not be justified, and you're in a world of hurt.
Right.
And I didn't want that. I wanted to keep coming back. Number two, God forbid it ever happens, and I hope it doesn't. But I want your voice and Richard Roberts and Brett's and Josh Bodine's and Gilbert's. I want your voices in my head telling me, hey, is this justified or not?
Mm.
Because when I make a decision instantly, I don't have time to stop and think about it. I want to have your guys' voices and your training in my head to help me do that. Same thing for after, when all those physiological effects take effect. I want to have this voice like a tape playing in there saying, hey, you're famous, lawyer up, shut up.
Yeah, that voice is going to have a Brooklyn accent in your head, right?
Well, I might have a King Richard accent.
Okay,
what's funny is Scott's already attended your next 10 seminars, Mike.
That's great. That's great. He's already attended. So Scott, let's back up a little bit. Are you from the Lehigh Valley originally?
Yeah, I grew up in Hellertown, and then we moved to Bethlehem in '73, and that's where I currently live now, my own home.
And do a lot of training out there. But what started that? Because you say that you inherited your father's firearm. And were you not into firearms prior to that point? How old were you at that point?
Well, this was just 2010.
Wow.
Is when I inherited my dad's gun. Now, I grew up, like most people, shot a 22, tried to get squirrels with it and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
You say most people who don't live in New York or New Jersey. Yeah, that's what you mean, right?
Right.
Well, yeah, for me, what was normal. In fact, we had a police chief that lived straight up, just up the block from me. And he'd see me, I was 12 years old. He'd see me carrying my rifle to run my trap line in the winter. And he's like, hey, you going to check your traps? Just be careful. It wasn't a big deal seeing a 12-year-old with a rifle,
Wow.
But yeah, but like I said, then, but I never really got into the handgun thing. I never thought of a gun for self-defense. We just didn't. But I had several events that happened in my life that made me start thinking seriously about it. And I thought, well, my dad had a service revolver. Maybe I'll be inheriting that. And
are these events where you were in danger?
Well, close to it, put it that way.
Wow.
One was at my previous home in Bethlehem. A 9mm bullet came through the house, the wall of the house at 2. And
I'd say that's close to it, Scott. No big deal, right?
Yeah.
And what it was some people just randomly going around and, shooting. Nobody was after me personally, but still, I had the police come the next day and they actually found the bullet on the floor. It was a 9mm.
Wow.
And for the next 2 months, I'm laying in bed thinking, my God, if I really was attacked, though, what would I do? I got nothing.
Right.
Although my only joke was I could jump out of bed in my underwear and hope they die laughing, maybe.
Scott, you claim that they weren't going after you specifically, but I'm getting the feeling that you're in the witness protection program. I don't know if you should be on the air talking on the radio if you're in the witness protection program, Scott, if that's your real name.
Right.
Well, it's my alleged name, as an attorney once told me to say.
There you go. You have that incident that takes place, and it took all those years to decide, okay, I want to be able to protect myself, under any circumstances, right?
Yeah, that was actually around 1997 that happened. Another thing that happened a couple of years after that, police knocked on my door, had a toolbox out of my truck, and here somebody broke into my truck right in front of my house. That my old garage at one time had these old wooden doors on it that closed, and somebody actually tried to break in so hard they started separating the panels of wood. So that got and then one of the final kickers was I was up at Lake Wallenpaupack sitting eating lunch at the Overlook, and some van with a Jersey plate on it was a light metallic green, I'll never forget it, starts backing up in a hurry coming right from my driver's side door. And I thought, oh my God. And I'm facing the Overlook, and there was no place I could go. He slams the brakes, gets out, rips my car door open, and starts chewing me out. I guess he thought I cut him off or something. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm about as helpless as you can get, because I was looking for a pen or anything I could stab him with if he decided to come in and start taking me on. Wow. And I thought, belt it into your car, behind the wheel of your car. If you can't floor the gas and get out of there, which I couldn't, you're helpless. And
pretty vulnerable, yeah.
Yeah, and I tried to de-escalate it. All I said when he finally took a breath, I said, "Sir, please let go of my car door." Wow. And he went into me again, and he just started. And he took a breath. I said it again. He slammed the door, hopped in his van, and took off. Needless to say, it kind of wrecked my lunch, but it got me thinking. And that was probably like around 2009 or 10, and that's when my father had passed away, and that's when I inherited his revolver. And I immediately got some good training with that right off the bat to see if it was a working order and stuff like that, because I wasn't familiar with it. But when I decided to make carrying a handgun for self-defense serious and cross that line, and that's it. I got all kinds of training. I even got my NRA certification to be a pistol instructor, because you're taught differently from that angle. That's what I really wanted.
And you do a lot of dry fire training, right?
Yeah, I got a cool laser setup. I do private training here at my home and stuff. I run, as I think Jim was talking earlier, not just paper targets. It's running scenarios actually in my house.
Wow.
With targets, hostage targets, things like that, to give people an idea. Here's some possibilities you could do if you're in this situation.
Sure. And it's getting more and more difficult these days with getting your hands on ammunition, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know what? With my laser, one cartridge is good for 5,000 rounds, and the replacement cap's only $40. So I can do a lot of training real dirt cheap. And then when I go to the range, I'll only shoot maybe 20 or 25 shots in an hour, because a friend of mine he was in the military, and he said, always train as if you only have one shot in your gun.
Wow.
If you're not making it, the rest don't matter.
I do have one more question for you that I've never got to ask you. If you really made this serious step roughly 2010. Is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay, so prior to that, uh, what was your system of beliefs? Did you believe in the Second Amendment, and did you believe in the importance of people having that right? Were you always sort of someone who thought along those lines and in favor of freedom and things of that nature?
You know what? I think it's actually the answer is yes, but from a different point of view. I just grew up taking it for granted that this is America. And, again, I walked with a rifle with a trap line. And to me, all this is what normal is.
Right.
Having a firearm at a young age to carry my trap line. Even the chief of police it was the Hellertown police, wasn't bothered. He's like, no, okay, just be careful. And so I kind of assumed that this is what America everywhere was like. And so, like I said, I didn't have any experience.
So you grew up with the opposite experience as Brooklyn, in other words. In Brooklyn, you're raised and you think that everywhere is the same, where good people don't own firearms. And you grew up in America, the United States of America, understanding that this is a God-given right protected by our Constitution. And government doesn't have the right to just take that away, right?
Correct. Yeah. And my father was an auxiliary police officer. You know what I mean? It wasn't official police, but he'd be called. And that's where he had his service revolver. It was an old 38 Saturday Night Special. And, so I remember where he used to hang it in his holster, in the attic or the basement stairwell going down. And, you just knew you didn't touch it. But again, a handgun, to me, that was just normal.
Right. I've got one more question for you, Scott. How happy are you that wake-up call with that round going through your window, not intended for you, took place and you were not harmed, where you ultimately made decisions to arm yourself and protect yourself, as opposed to some people who don't have that kind of a wake-up call, and they don't find out that they should have taken those measures until it's too late? How happy are you that you... So I don't want to say you dodged a bullet, but you kind of did, right?
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, actually, if you've seen where the bullet came through, it's very possible I could have been sitting there at one point. Definitely glad it is. I do realize, even when I talk to people about getting training and people that I train, there has to come a moment when you say, yeah, I want to do this, like I did. And I wish everybody took it as seriously as I did. And that's how I try to train the people that I train with that. But there comes a point you say, okay, I want to do this. And it becomes personal then. And I think everybody's got to have that moment. But when you do, thank God there's people like you guys out there to give us good training, so we know what the law is and how to handle a firearm safely.
Well, Scott, I really want to thank you for coming on the program and sharing your story with us. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to get a whole lot out of it. Take your words of advice. And hopefully we'll see more people out at those seminars saying, hey, I heard about this from Scott on the radio. Where is the greatest of all time? Where is he? And we can throw you out there. Shake hands with people. Kiss babies.
I'm going to get them to a Law Shield seminar to learn the law. That's what I'll do, because that's what people need to know.
Absolutely.
I just love how much you care, Scott. I love talking to Scott because you're so passionate about it and you care. And I've seen you help so many people by bringing them to the seminars and exposing them to Mike's knowledge. Yeah.
Definitely. And that's what I train them.
Right. Thank you so much, Scott. God bless you. And thank you so much for being a listener to the program.
More than welcome, guys. Keep up the great work, and God bless.
You too, Scott. Thanks.
For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. We've got two more. We got two more. Let's do 5 minutes apiece. Can we do that?
Sure.
I don't know.
He's running a little bit over time tonight.
Good.
What do you mean over time?
You get Arnie going.
Good stuff.
Get Arnie going.
Wait.
Thank you, everybody who's sticking around on the internet. Internet, feel free to throw your comments. As you can see, we do ask questions when they come on through. So thank you, everybody who's participated in the program throughout the entire night. Love to have you. This program is all about our listeners.
Who's next? Arnie or Matt?
Arnie.
Okay.
Arnie. Let's give Arnie a shot. What do you think?
See what happens.
All right.
Good deal. Billy Chris, what's been on your brain?
Well, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I did take a look at the, I don't know if we'll have time for it tonight. Maybe we can get into it next time, but the...
Hi, is this Arnie?
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Are you the inventor of mustard wine, Arnie?
Sort of.
Sort of.
I make wine inside my bunker.
Okay, so you've been on the program before, haven't you?
Yes, I have. And I have to tell you, I'm very humidified right now because I have a serious question that I was told. Well, I have like 2 questions, maybe 5. But so I heard that you have to be vaginated in order to get a concealed carry permit in Philadelphia. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, one more time.
In Philadelphia County, do you have to be vaginated in order to get a concealed carry permit?
I think that's beyond the scope of my practice, sir.
Oh, okay. All right. So, do I need a concealed carry?
For what?
Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh,
You're
okay.
live on the air, sir.
Do you need a concealed carry permit in order to carry a potato gun?
A potato gun? I'm unfamiliar. Why didn't you introduce me to the ways of the potato gun?
Well,
is that like a zucchini gun?
I have wild skunks in my yard, and I wanted to attack them with potatoes. And I was scared.
I think you're mistaken, Arnie. I think it's tomatoes that you need for the skunks. Tomatoes.
Tomatoes? This is not Italy.
I think you need I think you're searching for a tomato gun. You do not need a license to carry for a tomato gun.
Oh, good gracious Lord Jesus. Thank you.
They're protected by our Constitution. The right to keep and bear tomatoes shall not be infringed. Remember that one?
Yes, but do I have to wear a mask when carrying the potato gun or tomato gun?
Well, those are 2 different things. Don't get the 2 confused, Arnie. The potato guns and tomato guns are dramatically different.
Will they kill skunks?
You should consider joining an organization that protects our tomato gun rights, because there are a lot of there's a lot of anti-tomato legislation out there these days.
Is that the Basil Association I've been hearing so much about?
Well, if you speak with some people in the law-abiding tomato-owning community, they're very split as to which organization most appropriately represents their rights. But I will tell you this, that this presidential administration will do everything that it possibly can to make sure that law-abiding citizens don't have access to tomatoes.
How about if I just throw a can of tomato soup at somebody's head?
Well, I believe that there's a product similar to that. Snowflakington might be the proprietor of that one.
Oh, wonderful.
Tomato can, the toss in tomato can, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe there's going to be a commercial for tomato guns and tomato cans and skunks.
I think
what
so.
If I had cream of mushrooms?
I think it's coming very
instead?
soon.
What's that?
What if I had a can of cream of mushroom instead?
Hey, whatever works.
You know what you really should be eating instead of tomatoes and potatoes and cream of mushroom soup is you should be eating a bowl of mustard, Arnie. That's what you need to be doing.
Dude, I get the award for the mustard.
You are hereby awarded. You get the mustard award. It is your lucky day, Arnie.
Yes, I'm so excited. Oh my God. Oh, jeez.
We're going.
So wonderful. I've never been so honored my entire life.
There's going to be a ceremony. We're going to have you come on up to the stage, and Philly Chris has these super soakers filled with mustard, and we're just going to drench you in
That's
mustard
right.
all over the stage.
We're gonna bathe you down with.
We actually have one of those
You can
big
even wear a
Gatorade
mask if
things
you
full
want
of
to.
mustard. We have a big Gatorade drum full of mustard we're going to dump on you.
Yeah, that's it.
So wonderful.
There we go.
Oh, is that? Oh, who is that voice? Is that producer guy?
It sure is. It's Russ, the producer.
That's my full
hi,
name.
Russ. I listen to you every week.
Oh,
We got.
You're
Do we have a
Yay.
Russ fan? Arnie's a Russ fan. We've got a
Oh,
Russ fan.
Oh, you're a Russ fan, are you?
oh
Yes.
jeez.
What's your
I
favorite
read-
thing about Russ?
Everything. I love. I hear that he has like fuzzy bunny slippers.
They're actually Bigfoot slippers from when I slayed Bigfoot.
Bigfoot slippers.
Yeah.
Bigfoot. Get it right. Get your
I-
facts
I-
straight, Arnie.
You need
I
some new
drew
slippers
100
now, Russ.
times on my wall. I love Russ, the producer.
Okay.
I
Uh-huh.
love Russ, the producer.
Well, you're not the first person who's called in and told us that. I just hope you understand.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, was
Get
that
in
my
line.
Russ is incredibly popular. This is the subculture, the Russ fan club out there. And
Mhm.
he's got this big shrine
I
dedicated
just
to
kind
him,
of
and
imagine him being like this brawny guy with like a tennis band on his head.
I don't even know what a tennis band is.
like a sweatband, right? I imagine like Andre Agassi or something.
What, to,
right?
to absorb
That's
sweat?
Woo!
Why would I
It'd be
want to
really-
keep the sweat on my
It would be
forehead?
extra special hot if he was like like a gamer kind of guy, like
Oh,
that
God.
sat there and did games all
Oh,
day.
come on! If you're the Russ fan club, you know.
Yeah, you would already know
that
that.
Russ is very much a gamer.
I'll play Halo
right.
right now.
There's actually a shrine dedicated for Russ over in Burnwell, West Virginia.
What?
The townspeople got together and they built this with their bare hands. And they've
Oh,
got
I'm sure.
a life-size statue of Russ outside the building.
There's a
And-
documentary on YouTube about.
I actually
There
have
is,
a song
there is.
about Russ. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah, it's that. Why don't you sing us the Russ song before you go?
God.
I got Russ Man fever. He's driving me crazy. Russ Man fever.
How do I
Like
shut
it?
this guy up?
I love it. I love it. We're gonna have Jazzy Ralph record that one in the
Oh,
studio.
God.
You can
Russ,
play it at
man,
the White House
okay.
next time it's there.
Is it okay if I'm naked on the air because I just got out
No.
of the shower?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
YouTube has strict rules against showing nipples.
Well, he's not on camera.
I know.
Next
All right.
time.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Arnie. We hope to have you back on the program again soon. And do me a favor
Thank
this
you.
weekend. Listen, it's in all seriousness, though. We got a very special weekend coming up with Independence Day, and we all care very much about this country. So, from the bottom of my heart, I want to tell you to eat a bowl of mustard, Arnie, will ya?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Mike, for having me. You have the best show ever. Russ, you're so hot. Bye.
Oh, God. I think I'm going to need to purchase a
let's
bag
end
of
it on-
bees.
I don't think we can follow that
Well,
one.
I can't really top that. Yeah.
I
No.
can't top that. We're gonna end it on that.
Well, wait, didn't
we'll-
Chris have something to say?
No, we'll catch up next time.
Okay.
The UFO report came out, folks. Take a look at that. Check it out. The narrative.
Yeah, I
mentioned,
want everybody prepared for Philly
Mhm.
Chris's reading of the UFO report. Your homework this week is to check
That's
out that
right.
UFO report. Chris, why don't you get the link up on the social media so that way if
Sounds
our
great.
listeners want to check that out, they can for
Yeah.
themselves and they'll be prepared.
Yeah.
Time to go to UFO school with Philly Chris next week, right?
That's right,
Hmm.
ladies and gentlemen. Big announcement next week. Also,
Big
I'm going to be doing
announcement
some
next week.
behind-the-scenes fireworks stuff since Joe Biden was talking about giving us permission. So I might have some footage for the show.
I
Oh,
am
great.
so glad he's giving
Yeah.
us permission to celebrate Independence Day.
Thank you,
Right.
Your Highness. Thank you.
Yes.
Please don't.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, my
He
lord.
can go stick something large into something small, like a camel through the eye of a needle, or a telephone pole. Never mind.
There we go. Very nice.
Very good. Well, Russ's PSA is don't light fireworks and
Don't cook bacon with your shirt off.
don't cook bacon with the shirt off. And I honestly don't light. I'm not saying don't light fireworks. I'm saying do it responsibly, right? I shouldn't say anything about it. I should just leave that.
This is
topic
not
alone
legal
altogether.
advice. If
Not
it was,
legal advice, not advice at all.
I wanted to say what we probably be.
I shouldn't say anything about it. I should just leave that. This is not legal advice.
who's doing that?
What?
Yeah, I'm getting a playback. Is that Liberty?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was monitoring the comments. I just wanted to say, with your animals, I'm sure everybody's seen on Facebook, but just be careful with your animals because they do run away. Everybody thinks it's not going to happen to them, but we've seen multiple dogs get lost because they get scared from the fireworks and they run away. So make sure you secure your dogs, bring them inside because they do get scared from the fireworks.
That's very nice. That's
Wait,
very nice.
hang on. Do they make like earmuffs for dogs, like so you can
This is
protect
a good
their
idea,
ears?
Russ.
I don't know if dogs
CB
would like
wants
that.
constitutional carry for zucchini guns. Right? We really need national reciprocity for zucchini guns. Legal in all 50 states. Scott says, are the laws different for cherry tomatoes and big boy tomatoes? Well, big boy tomatoes are high capacity tomatoes. They've been trying to get rid of those for a very long time. You know, they're illegal in California, from what I understand. Californians are very, very scared of big boy tomatoes.
I hear they're scared of magazines. Just too many pages for those who can't read.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
We need coloring books instead.
High capacity magazine. No, we want coloring books.
We want coloring
Color
books
outside the lines.
High capacity
Russ,
coloring
is your computer
books.
screen on so everybody can see your desktop?
What? No,
Or
that's just
everybody
on
can see-
Skype, you guys.
No, oh, that's just on Skype. I was gonna say, what's this folder that says documents for cheating on my taxes? What's that folder?
Jeez, Mike.
That's good. Good knowing you, Russ.
Well, I was studying for the tax test by paying all of the taxes. We're
What's
not in
that
national
folder
debt
that
anymore.
What's that folder that says photo shoot where I covered myself from head to toe in duck sauce? What's that one?
Oh, you want me to show you that one?
CB. Happy Independence Day. You've been very active, and we
I
appreciate
think
it.
the last caller has pictures of that, I think. Yeah.
All right, that's a wrap for tonight.
It's not
folks.
duck
That's a
sauce, it's mustard.
Hey,
Peace and love, everybody. Peace and love.
Peace and love.
that's all we got for today. Stick around for We the People, the Constitution Matters. Pastor David Whitney, Professor Philadelphia. I'll be joining as your legal analyst. Happy birthday to Liberty Lee. We miss you, Ellie. Daddy loves you.